Hello. How are you? I hope you're doing well. Mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. There's a thing going on, and that is sound. You can hear
Name
me,
game.
and I can hear you because I just heard that. I hope you heard it. Did you hear it? But I just realized something, and that is I did not adjust my audio.
We're
It's
in the
quite
money.
loud. Oh my goodness. Hold on. I've got to tell you all a lot of stuff, though. Hold on. Let me see. This is in my way. What am I hearing right now? It's a very good question. What am I hearing? I know what I'm hearing. Hold on. I need to give you something. You know, I'm going to tell you this. Nope. Nope. No. Yes. Wait. So, you should be hearing this right now, but you don't. Oh. So, guess what, everybody? OBS just updated, so that was very exciting. OBS updated, and a lot of things updated, which is great, except that not all those updates are giving me what I want. Hey, everybody, it's me, Triple JP. I'm gonna go and mess with audio, but I'm gonna say hi to you all first. How are you? I hope you're doing well. Um, Also, Hawkeye, thank you for that resub. Merry Christmas. And Atomica, I'm gonna sing for you both. You know what? I was gonna fix this stuff first. Wait. Oh, good, you can hear the sound. That's great. I am not hearing sound, but I bet that's because yep, uh-huh. Yeah. We're all good, everybody. Hi. It is I, Triple SJP. It is the Mac Gaming Thursday, and I'm hanging out with you all. I hope you're doing well. So, wait. I don't want you to have game sound right now, because I feel like that will be distracting. There. Now you don't have it. Um, Hi. I want to, like, sing and then chat with you all. There's so many things. But also we're gonna play really hardcore today. I just want you to know today's like gonna be a super hardcore playing day, theoretically. I mean, I'm gonna say it out loud and we'll see if it happens, but theoretically, that's what's gonna happen today. But I do have to sing and I have a show and tell. And so, I mean, we're gonna get there. It's just that, you know, what I wanted to say was, um, and this is actually kind of serious. Uh so what I wanted to say, it's about Hawkeye. Hawkeye, I know you're out there right now watching because I saw you in chat, and I have to tell you something. Hawkeye, what I need to tell you, I don't quite know how to say this, but what I feel like I have to tell you is the name game. Come on, everybody. Mm, I said, now let's play a game. I bet you I can make a rhyme out of anybody's name. The first letter of the name, I treat it like it wasn't there. And then a B or an F, or an M will appear. And then I say Bo at a B, then I say the name, then banana, fanner, and four. Then I say the name again with an F, very plain, then a fee, fi, and a mo. And then I say the name again with an M this time, and there isn't any name that I can't rhyme. Hawkeye, 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 Bo, Buckeye, banana, fanner, for Hawkeye, fee, fi, mo, mock, eye. Hawkeye, the name game. Woo! Merry Christmas, Hawkeye. Hawkeye, I was just thinking about you the other day. Um, because of the conversation that we didn't have because I was in game on Monday about vampire, right, and resurrection, and how vampires might the ways in which vampires might relate to various religious traditions and the idea of resurrection and all of that, right? Because I think about if a person is like a I imagine, look, I imagine becoming a vampire can be psychologically challenging for a person in many ways. Do you know what I mean? Like, I imagine there are many different ways to respond to becoming a vampire, depending on how it happens, etc. And if a person is like very, very religious, I imagine what ends up happening is they either hate themselves, right? Think of themselves as lost, damned, outside of all love, or they find some way to reconcile their existence as a vampire with God's creation. And then they find some way to sort of like think through that. And I imagine everybody does it in different ways, but I imagine that there are vampires that go about that process of reconciling if they're religious beforehand, how they go about reconciling their religiosity with their current state. And I imagine it depends on the kind of religiosity you have and what that means. But I think it's actually pretty interesting to think about that. You know what I mean? Like think about how one goes about conceiving of oneself within one's religious cosmology. And again, I imagine there's not one way that everybody sees it. And I also imagine these things are kind of different based on what other things are existing in your game. Do you know what I mean? Like, uh, for example, uh,
Name game.
woo, I got that. Thomas says, I'm having a fun day today dealing with anxiety over not going to class today, even though classes ended last week, but my brain won't listen that we didn't have classes. I understand that. Also, I've got another name game and and a, uh, uh, a We're in the Money. And also, thank you for that resub, Baron Tor. Playing hard. I thought we were playing Disco Elysium. Hey, Baron Tor, it's good to see you. I did have an interesting play in Urban Shadows once. Played a street preacher that was changed into a vampire involuntarily. His main goal was to find a cure to being deprived of going to heaven since he couldn't die. Oh yeah, that's like, see, again, right? All those things are really interesting. And like there are like, right. And there are some religions that don't have heaven or hell. Also, pre-Vatican II, Catholicism had a purgatory. What if a vampire believes that being a vampire is what purgatory is? If that's purgatory is being a vampire. I don't know. Like I imagine there are just lots of different ways to ponder what it means to be a vampire within the context of different belief systems. You know, I just think it's super interesting. Hey, PB, it's so good to see you. Hi, it's so good to see you. PB's like, I have like fond feelings for PB. And I also think about like, how do we think about are vampires dead or not? Right? In classic, that's a tricky question. I think there's some mythologies where in yes they are dead, but in other mythologies they're spirits or demons or there's something else altogether. Is being or they're the victims of a I don't know, a curse. Uh, Also, they can be killed, so they're not impervious to dying a second time. Yeah, like I think that there's just like there's a lot going on there in terms of what we think vampires are, right? It's good to see you. Happy to see this semester hasn't swelled. Oh, PB, it hasn't swelled me whole. I do need to point out for the record that all of my students' final papers are due today. I have been dreading emails from students saying, I cannot turn it in, even though I've had all semester. Can I turn it in later? I was like, you know what? My stream is starting, so I'm gonna go be on stream for the next 3 hours. And if they email me in a panic, the papers are due at 5. So I was like, well, uh, so, oh, but the next couple of days will be grading. Lots of grading. That'll be very exciting. Yeah, yeah. All right, but as a preacher, would he be able to let himself be killed, or would that be the sin of suicide? Oh, it's yeah. See, like Atomica, there are a lot of really good questions there. Do you know what I mean? Like there are a lot of questions. I was also thinking about, I don't know if any of you ever saw that movie, Love at First Bite, with George Hamilton and Susan St. James? Susan St. James? And Susan St. James, right? George Hamilton, Susan St. James, and the guy who played the vampire hunter, his name I can't remember. Thank you, Hawkeye. Susan St. James. Yes. Um, and what I was thinking of was that in that movie, um, I think the vamp what was his name? Like the guy that played the vampire hunter, he pulled out like a I think he pulled out a Star of David, and of course it didn't work. Or he might have put like there was a thing about there's like a so what we think about vampires, I think, is also going to be impacted by um, does true faith exist, right? Like how do the traditional vampire um, wards, like the drawbacks, how do they work? For example, can a vampire is a vampire repelled by all religious iconography, regardless of whether or not the individual person wielding it has faith or not? Is it any religious iconography or a particular religion's iconography? That implies something different. Does it have to be wielded by a person, and that person has to have true faith in that particular iconography? And if so, would any iconography work or only certain iconographies? Right. So that becomes that says something about vampirism. Or, in Vampire V5, this is also the case with older editions too. They wanted to sort of model some of the traditional vampire banes, things like can't cross running water, et cetera, but not all vampires have that issue. So, but you could take it as a personal flaw that your particular individual vampire, probably because they believe it to be the case, cannot cross running water. So, does things like being repelled by crosses or stars of David or whatnot, does that uh, is that an individual vampire flaw that you take for your character, or is it universal for all vampires? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of different questions to ask about how vampires work. And one of the coolest things about Night's Black Agents, which is I ran a short shot with Greg, Seasons of Death, Autumn, and I do want to run that. That was a solo. That's Night's Black Agent solo, and I do want to run more of that, by the way. That is my goal. Maybe I can do that during break. But what's really cool about that is, by the way, I'm still going to sing. No, that's not the one. I'll use this, but it's not the one that I want. Do you ever go and look at your bookshelf and think, my bookshelf is not alphabetized, so I cannot find the things that I want as quickly as I could normally do so? Because I don't know about you, but normally I alphabetize my bookshelf. Uh, I have an organizational system. It is not currently organized this way, which gives me great pain because it really should be. There's the Dracula dossier. This will probably do uh, in a pinch, but I did want the original book because I wanted to tell you something about it. Uh, Dracula Dracula. Probably in the back corner. Anyhow, I think this will do it. Probably. Uh, so, by the way, I still have two songs to sing. Uh, Richard Benjamin. Thank you, Hawkeye. Richard Benjamin. Yes, that is the one. Uh, uh, imagine not turning in your finals on time and asking for extension. Oh, OPB. OPB. I don't have to imagine that. I know it. But the current situation is that people will usually not ask for an extension. They'll just email me 2 weeks from now and be like, "Hey, I didn't turn in my final, but here it is," like that. Um, Hawkeye says, "For a devout Christian, it would definitely feel like a curse. The viewpoint would be it was something demonic, satanic. They would not be able to go to heaven because of their soul being, in a sense, stolen from them, and not being able to die and go to heaven." Not sure if that is VTM canon, but that is how I would interpret it. Um, Depends on which VTM, because there are different eras of Vampire the Masquerade had different viewpoints on it. And even within Vampire the Masquerade, there was a time like Vampire the Masquerade second edition before revised, nothing was particularly, it was mostly like different people think different things about vampires, but it's uncertain which one is which. And then things became more fixed, and it's the lore can go a lot of different places. In the original, in the base lore, which at times was considered a rumor or a possibility, but not necessarily certain. Other times was certain. It was believed, as the lore goes, that the first vampire. This is like particular lore. The first vampire was Cain. When Cain slew Abel and was cursed by God, the curse was the curse of vampirism, and so all vampires um, inherit the sins of the father, and they all suffer from the curse of Cain because of Cain slaying Abel. So within certain ideas, right, of within certain lore within VTM, all vampires suffer from the curse of Cain and are fundamentally damned. I don't know. I don't think I was gonna say something, but I actually am not quite certain. There are certain kind of things about like vampire beings that I think are still a little bit unclear in certain ways, right? Because I'm thinking about how vampires in VTM have all the memories of their former selves, but they also have this beast within them that is always hungry. That if they don't hold on to their humanity, they'll lose themselves to the beast and be lost. But I don't know, and we know you have to die. Well, yeah, you die. Well, that's tricky. This is a bit about interpretation. This is a bit about interpretation of what is happening when you become a vampire. So in VTM lore, uh, if you die with vampire blood in you, you can then be brought. Then you wake up again, but then there's like a whole process. So the question becomes, I mean, there are a lot of like deep questions, right? Are you dead? Right? Are you just dead and the person that you were does not exist anymore? And the being that now exists is just a memory, just has the memories of the thing that exists before, but you're actually just not the same person. You're actually just a risen corpse who is just not the same. You're like some kind of mockery of who you once were, like some kind of evil spirit is animating your body with the memories of you, but it is not you. Is that what it is? Or are you still you, but without a soul? Or are you still you with a soul, but also with a beast? Like, what are you as a vampire? And I think what's interesting is that I'm not certain if VTM has a full answer on that one, actually. Uh, hmm. Like, if you died in combat, that would probably jive, but if he was just like, end my evil existence, that might be a little great. So, is it weird that my favorite vampire movie, non ironically, and not just the comedy, but Vampire in Brooklyn, it was actually pretty good? I haven't seen it yet. Is it good? Personally, I think it's the faith, not the iconography, says Rissa. See, the thing is, Rissa, I think it would depend on your world, right? In a world where the power comes not from faith but from God, then the iconography should also still carry the power of God, which is why I think there's some in some vampire lore, like vampires cannot step on hallowed ground, right? Hallowed ground, right? Like in some lore, a vampire just cannot actually step onto hallowed ground at all because the power of God makes that place holy and they can't be there. That's not about the individual faith of the people. It's that the ground itself is holy. So I suppose it depends on the universe, the way that you sort of construct the universe. In lore, doesn't a crucifix only affect a vampire if the person actually believes either the cross having the effect or they have to be part of the Christian faith? Hawkeye, that's a good question. I think you might actually have to have the ability true faith for it to work. I think. I am. I'd have to check on that one because I actually think it's not just. I think it's actually. It might be a bit. Also, I think it might be different from edition to edition, and somebody here knows the answer to that question. Does a pond count as running water if it doesn't drain anywhere? No. I think for it to be running water, it has to move. So ponds and lakes are fine, but rivers would not be. I think. Hey, Artie, how are you? Dresden Files has it the personal faith in an icon rather than the cross specifically. Ah. Tomic says, imagine all those ancient vampires suddenly getting effed up in 100 AD. What is with these people and their little wooden teeth? Theory how much it would F up a modern day vampire if a priest blessed the water in a fog machine. Oh. Huh. Depends. Krellin says, depends on lore. In masquerade lore, it's the faith of the bear that matters, unless the vampire has a quirk of faith on their own. Uh, Picturing guys in hazmat suits from beginning old castles. I see it. Later on, they added that while vampirism was God's curse, disciplines were a gift from Lilith. Oh, that's interesting. Artie says, I think if I was making my own, I would have vampires spread misinformation about vampire lore, confuse and mislead people. Unstable Dio says, and this conversation completely ignores the lore of the Kui Jin. Yes, because they have a totally different lore, as do the kindred of the Ebony Kingdom, right? The African vampires. Different, but of course, V5 has not reprinted Vampires of the East or Vampires of the Ebony Kingdom, and I doubt they will. I doubt they will touch those at all. I bet we will never see them again. That is what I'm going to guess. I'm going to guess that because they tried to go and make sort of more diverse vampire lines that dealt with vampire mythology from other places, but there were controversies about how they did that, and I imagine they just don't want to deal with the. I imagine they're going to think it's too hot to handle to redo it, so I imagine we'll never get a new book, a new version of Kindred of the East or Kindred of the Ebony Kingdom. Was there a third one? Was there a third one? It's a bummer because I really liked quite a few of the ideas in Kindred of the Ebony Kingdom. In some ways, it's all a little bit awkward if you wanted those things to remain cross-compatible because quite a few of the entire ways of thinking about vampires were not the same, but evil spirit emanating body was the lore of the Kui Jin. The body didn't have to be the spirit's original. That's Krellin. Artie says, if you go through a transporter, are you or just a couple of you are? I was having a conversation with somebody about this, Artie. I have an answer for you. Well, you know what I mean. Makes me think of the discussions about Dermot's humanity. Whispers flashback. Oh yeah. You can't spin out hell ground either. Just fall right through. There was not a yeah. I don't think there was a third one either. Right? Hey, Anarch So, Artie, about the transporter question because we're talking about teleportation. I believe we have two different types of teleportation, right? You have magic / superpower teleportation, where you instantaneously go from point A to point B. Bamf, right? And in that one, I think it's still you. I don't think it's a copy of you. I think it's just you who's actually moving. But in all like the sci-fi versions of teleportation, like transporters, it seems as if you are a copy because it seems like what they do is they disassemble your molecules and then reassemble molecules somewhere else. So I actually, because there are transporter accidents where things happen in the transfer, so it seems as if you may not be the same you when you're doing sci-fi teleportation. But you know, misform. Um, so I'm gonna sing, and then I'm gonna tell you about this thing because it's really interesting. Y'all got me on a really interesting topic. Anyhow, what I wanted to say was the name game. Come on, everybody. I love it when Barentor resubs because Barentor's name starts with a B. Anyway, I said, now let's play a game. I bet you I can make a rhyme out of anybody's name. The first letter of the name, I treat it like it wasn't there. And then a B or an F, on and will appear. And then I say bo at a B, then I say the name, then banana, fanner, and foe. Then I say the name again with an F, very plain. Then a fee, fi, and a mo. Then I say the name again with an M this time, and there isn't any name that I can rhyme. But if the first two letters are ever the same, I drop them both and say the name. I like Bob. Bob, drop the B's, Bo, or Fred. Fred, drop the F's, fo, red. Oh, Mary, Mary, drop the M's, mo, airy. That's the only rule that is contrary. Barentor, 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 Bo, Erentor, Banana, Fana, Fo, Ferentor, Fee, Fi, Mo, Merentor. Barentor, the name game. Woo! Thank you for that resub, Barentor. And also, Atomica gifted bits. And whenever we get tips or bits, I like to say thank you by singing We're in the Money by Ginger Rod, like as she sang it, as Ginger Rogers sang it in the film Gold Diggers of 1933, which means I sing it in Pig Latin, which I'm going to do right now in my megaphone, all 1933 style. Airway and hey, the anime. Airway and hey, the anime. Eve way up, gay, up, way up, way up, way up, way up, to tit, gay, young way, oh. Airway and hey, the anime. E the ice skates are on, he say. Old man, the yes and pray, we are a udre, you're stand we young ray. Ewe ebony, eat ray, ed leon say, elf way, ed brayon say, ute day. And we see the Anley order will look left the eye guy or knee the eye. We're in the money, we're in the money. We've got a lot of what it takes to get along. Thank you for those bits and give me an excuse to sing in Pig Latin. That makes me happy very much. So I wanted to show you something before we started. Ansible Deo says, it's not so much disassembly, but rather biological pattern replication on a grand scale, usually accompanied to destroyed the scanned version. But, like, don't you have to destroy the first version? So, ooh, what lovely emotes. Transporters exist because NBC in the 60s couldn't afford to do lots of shoots of shuttlecraft sets. That's also fair. So guess what came in the mail, everybody? I eBayed it. Here we have, of course, one of those, because you know where I'm at right now. I'm all about like exploring old games. From West End Games, the game they did, I think, right after they did Paranoia First Edition, is the here you go, The Price of Freedom, role-playing in Occupied America by Greg Costikian, which who also did Paranoia. And the role-playing game of Resistance, this was also a flop, by the way. The role-playing game of Resistance to Soviet occupation. Wah, wah, wah. If you wanted to play Red Dawn, the RPG, this would be the game. This is it. This is Red Dawn, the role-playing game that did not do well. It was a terrible flop, mostly because I think that people didn't quite know what to make of it. I think they were like, I don't know what is this. Is this a satire? Is this not a what? I think that's what happened with this one. But Uh, yeah, WG was the shiznits. Like, look at them, right? These are so the skies. The skies are filled with Soviet orbital defenses. Who controls the high ground of space controls Earth. America is naked to its enemies. The Soviet premier demands American surrender. The president complies. Soviet troops are landing in your hometown. In this, its darkest hour. America needs heroes. Are you willing to pay the price of freedom? In The Price of Freedom, you play an American who chooses to resist the communist occupiers. You must find the weapons and leadership to resist effectively. The invaders have absolute nuclear supremacy. Regular military opposition is impossible. The only way they can be defeated is to make the occupation of America so costly that they must withdraw. But remember, no occupied nation has ever liberated itself without outside help, and we have no one to help us. The fate of America is in your hands. Wolverines! I loved Paranoia First Edition. It's still my favorite edition. And I am excited to dig into The Price of Freedom because why would I not be? Come on, right? Yes. Too real game, too real. Sounds awful. So I'm very excited by it. I am look, I'm excited by really weird random things, so those are true things about me. But I want to say about Knights Black Agents. This is the solo book for one player, one GM, because the regular Knights Black Agents book is somewhere on that bookshelf. I suspect it's in that corner by my banjo, and I don't want to go over there to look for it. But they have this really cool thing in Knights Black Agents. So Knights Black Agents, which I really should go and do a full group of at some point, is all about basically Jason Bourne fighting vampires. Is the conceit of it? It's a very sort of it's gumshoe system, very cinematic, very high powered, very like you are very badass. That's what it's all about. But I wanted to find this thing for you, and it was where was it? So they have this very cool thing, tradecraft vampires. Right. So they have this whole thing in here about how do you want to make your vampires? What are the vampires in your world? So they talk about all the different kind of common mythologies around them and how do you want to make them? Like how do you want to sort of create what kind of abilities do you want your vampires to have? Why? Right? So they have, for example, listen, page 79. They have a whole discussion. I think there's probably more in the main book, but this is the solo version. So it says here, if it sucks life energy, lurks in the shadows, and treats humanity as cattle, it's a vampire. Your vampire should superficially resemble the classic bloodsucker from folklore, but as the player digs deeper into the mystery, they may find something very different behind the myth. This section discusses how to create variant vampires. As a starting point for design, consider the following 4 general types of vampires: alien, damned, mutant, and supernatural. These are not mutually exclusive by any means. A mutant vampire virus could have come from outer space or from hell. All supernatural phenomena might be fundamentally demonic, or, following Lovecraft, fundamentally misunderstood alien science. Is the astral vampire a supernatural being or a paraphysical one? Especially in modern fiction, vampires can partake of all 4 types. Evil infected humans who follow alien physical laws that eerily resemble vampire folklore. Much of the fun of postmodern horror comes from blurring these boundaries, and the director should feel free to do so. Nevertheless, much of the thrill of gothic horror comes from playing into the tropes and stereotypes of the genre, so the director shouldn't necessarily discard the default version or traditional answer for a given vampire. So they talk about the origin of the vampires, where do they come from, how do they spread, how many are there variants of the different vampires, is there a cure for vampirism, what is the relationship to humanity, like it says here, humanity. Many vampires were once human before they rose from the dead, signed a pact with Satan, were bitten, were infected, or what have you. To what extent are they still human? Do they retain their human memories and desires, human loyalties and hatreds? Can they pass as human, or do they depend on magic, or psionics, or heavy coats and hoodies to move around the city? These questions provide motivations for the conspiracy and some constraints on its resources. Um, and this here, life and death. Vampires traditionally are things between life and death, feeding on life to stave off death. From this basic myth comes scores of variations. Most vampires feed on blood, but others feed on spinal fluid or breath, sex, emotions, memories, youth, feces, food, or psychic power. Of all these, blood just plain works best thanks to centuries of fiction and millennia of symbolic weight. Even if your vampire feeds on will force or souls, consider using blood as the medium or host for the meal. Are vampires truly dead? Do they breathe, emit body heat, circulate blood, heal, feel emotions, react to toxins, excrete, have sex, notice the passage of time, sleep, dream? Can they return from the dead, even if beheaded or burnt, if something goes wrong or right? The general unlife cycle of your vampires will drive their plans, their housing arrangements, and their feeding patterns. Does a vampire gangster keep women around as larder, status symbol, harem, or all three? So they've got like a bunch of different ways of thinking about vampires. And if vampires are only created because they made a pact with Satan, that's gonna be a very different kind of a vampire than if the vampires are from another planet, or if they are human beings cursed because they did something bad, or if it's an infection, or if it's a ritual, or all these things. And it talks about the different banes of vampires. I think it's really well done, right? Like here is it says here, sunlight. Folkloric vampires attacked at night because that's when evil spirits were up and around, not because they had any particular aversion to the sun. Indeed, Polish and Russian vampires hunted from noon till midnight. In the 19th century, fictional vampires from Coleridge's Geraldine to Stoker's Dracula walk about in the sunlight all the time. Although Le Fanu's Camilla prefers to sleep late into the afternoon. Stoker's Dracula cannot use any of his vampire powers in the daylight, including his preternatural strength. Vampires smoldering and disintegrated in the sun comes from the movies, specifically Nosferatu from 1922 and The Return of the Vampire 1943. And Rice's vampires catch fire in the sunlight thanks to their combustible blood, and the vampires on ultraviolet actually explode in the sun. It's up to you whether the effects of sunlight are supernatural, in which case you need genuine sunlight, or grounded in some physiological or psychological reaction, opening up the possibility of using artificial sources of ultraviolet light. There's even a fun middle ground. Only true sunlight has any real effect on vampires, but a 500-year-old medieval warlord might still instinctively recoil from the heat of the heat and ultraviolet light of a UV lamp that feels like sunshine. So, herewith, a menu of possible sunlight effects. Nothing. Prevents use of all vampire powers or all powers except strength. Effect is prevented if vampire touches their native soil. Prevents vampire from regenerating damage, especially including damage from sunlight. Must be shining on the vampire in order for something else to kill them. Turns vampires into dust when vampire is mortally wounded. Turns vampire into a corpse. Night or darkness or moonlight revives them. Does damage based on exposure, like fire. Does damage based on intensity. The brighter and more direct the sunlight, the more damage. Damage it does can never be healed or regenerated. Explodes the vampire. If only ultraviolet light in sunlight kills vampires, polarized glass, such as tinted windows, or high SPF sunscreen might protect them. With some tweaking, these effects might apply to any bane. So they have a whole, they really do spend some time thinking about what powers are associated with vampires and what they might mean, how you might understand them, what their weaknesses might mean, how you might understand them, what that might mean, how do you think about it. And of course, part of Night's Black Agents is that you have to actually try to figure out what the actual real weaknesses are for the vampires that exist so that you might be able to counter them, because you may not know what those weaknesses are because there's so many myths out in the world. You have to figure out what's going on. So you as the director, I think they call it, yeah, have to figure those things out yourself as well. So that's actually really neat though, because they give you a lot of tools to be able to figure out how do you want to create vampires in your world and what are the implications of that, right? If it's scientific and it's just UV rays, then really good sunscreen will just keep vampires fine. If right, like, what are you going for with your vampire lore? Is it, yeah, what are you doing? And that's just really cool. I really loved sort of thinking about the different ways in which they gave you options to understand vampires in that book. And this is just the solo ops version. This is a standalone book. This is for one player, one GM, and I did do once already. I really want to do another one. Maybe I can do one this break. Um, maybe I can do one this break. Anyhow, really wanted to. I imagine there's a lot more about this in the full book. Also in the full book, not this one, they actually talk about the conspiramid, which was like I think one of the things that people really praise for uh, Night's Black Agents. That you sort of create a conspiracy pyramid, and the conspiracy pyramid um, has ways to understand how it's a way to do sandbox games really well. I think it's a great tool for sandboxes because it talks about it's not just an order of battle. Actually, I don't know if I have. I don't think there's a conspiramid in this particular book. Core, counter, covert, cryptography, contacts, continuity, conspiramid 86. I wonder if I can show you a picture. I don't know if there's one in here because I've got both books, so I don't know. Let me see. They might just mention it. Hold on, hold on, hold on. 86. Yeah, there's not actually a picture in this one, but I there's one in the main book, which I do have here. Anyway, the conspiramid is not just an order of battle with these are the people in the low and here's the top of the pyramid. It's also about um, reactions. Like, what are the likely reactions to poking at any particular part of the pyramid, right? So, for example, they've got things like investigation or threatening. Like, if you mess with people in the very bottom of the pyramid, they're probably not going to bring out the big guns, but they have like a way to sort of um, note the general tactics when you get the attention of people at this. Because the point of the levels is not just, well, who's in charge, but also what kind of resources they have at their disposal and how they tend to respond to people messing with them, right? And so that if you're messing around at the bottom of the pyramid, the kinds of responses you'll get are these sorts of things. Versus if you're messing around in the middle of the pyramid, you'll get different kinds of responses. Anyway, it's a very, very cool thing. I feel really good about it. I really enjoyed running the one-on-one that I did. I really do need to run it as a full group at some point in time, but very cool things to think about with vampires. Just gonna say that. Uh, let's see. I'm excited about you getting excited about things. Thank you. Hi, Volpez. Why you guess I'm a badass when I'm killing my local vampires? As well, you should be. Sex is more of a succubus, but in some versions, those are also vampires, right? Are there vampires and then vampires spawn? Like you can also have that as well. You can have different uh, in the kind of version that I'm running in our world, there's a difference between true vampires and not true vampires, right? So there are two different types of vampires. So the true vampires, the original, who I think became vampires through there's actually two different lines of vampires, the Hungarian vampires, and there's more than one line of vampires. There are true vampires and there are lesser vampires, greater and lesser vampires. So work it out. Not always, Artie. The succubus bit. See the hunger. Sex be a method of transferring life force. Yep. And also, of course, it's tricky, right? Because vampires were seen very often to be about sex within mythology, not in a sexy times way, but in a scary bad way. Syphilis, um, unchecked sexual desire, right? So, like, vampires just represent so many different things, right? Often sexual disease. So, so vampires are not disconnected in terms of folklore from sex, as opposed to werewolves, which are representing other things in society. There was a Ray-Ban commercial with everyone putting on sunglasses except one at dawn time. Oops. Yeah, I think of Law School when I think of succubi. Well, what's really interesting, Artie, is that I don't, because we were talking about this, PB and I, actually a bunch of us over at Carousel Court, the crew, were talking about this because Pope, PB, myself, Lindy, uh, Lynn, that within the popular imagination, the succubi were not particularly popular within mainstream, let's say, U.S. Anglophone imagination until a little bit later. I was trying to think of like when was the first time I saw media depictions of a succubus? I certainly, when I think about the core creatures that I saw, uh, vampires, werewolves, ghosts, Um, witches, obviously. Demons, obviously. Those things. But like succubi, I think one of the first succubi I saw probably came from film in the late 70s, early 80s. Well, actually, maybe not. I think the first time I probably saw a succubus was probably in the pages of Heavy Metal magazine. Probably, actually. But there weren't a lot of them. Like they came to the imagination a little bit later, I think. Um, and then you can think about what happens with spacefaring vampires as termination shock. Does the light from other stars have the same effect? Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. According to Superman, different colors of stars emit different types of radiation. But of course, if it's supernatural, again, this is why you have to decide: are your vampires scientific or are they mystical? Because those things have different impacts. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that this happens not just with vampires, but also with fantasy settings. Sometimes people want to say, "Oh, well, that doesn't make any sense because science would blah da 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 da." And I was like, "Yeah, but that assumes that this world it works that way because it might not." Um, you know what I mean? Like, I sometimes people want to go and bring their real world science to explain something that is set in a different planet in a fantasy world with magic, and sometimes that works, but sometimes it doesn't work. So you kind of just have to know what kind of world it is that you're dealing with. By the way, we should probably start the game, at least have it up and going. So we're totally gonna do that, by the way, so that we are here. Boom. Okay. Also, do you remember that in Star Wars, Star Trek, right? There's that the cage, or no, one of the first episodes of Star Trek was like the salt vampire that like would like look like a beautiful woman and like just like suck all the salt out of your body, and that was sort of framed as a vampire. So I mean, like, they're Come on. There we go. There we go. I need to read chat. Um, Too much pure channel history for America for succubi. Yeah. Vampire and Vampire Spawn is what BG3 does. Oh, okay. Baldur's Gate 3. I need to play it. So it's like the structure of the mob or something. Yes, actually, because Night's Black Agents is basically mixing conspiracy thrillers from espionage with vampires. Basically what they're doing. Succubi are harder to do with a more puritanical culture and not just fall into the whole sex addict trope. Yes, yeah, and I also think that there is probably just they just didn't seem to be part of our we just didn't seem to do them as much. But there's a lot of myths that we didn't get as often, you know what I mean?
Weather has not
Until
been
later.
kind to Lily's little sandcastle. The once mighty towers are quickly eroding away. You can see something shining back to you from what must have been a vast underground catacomb network.
I'm gonna turn up my volume. There we go. And then there are the links of porphyry with vampirism. Oh, absolutely, Hawkeye. Hey, Roller! How cute. Trooper thinks he's gonna play games. I totally am. Especially if they have a severe iron deficiency. Yeah. Music's a bit loud. Thank you, Volpez. I can fix that. The Man Killer. Thank you. The Salt Vampire. Thank you, Hawkeye. I was like, what was the name? I'm turning down our music. Oh, the existential of vampirism isn't what Disco Elysium is. It might be, though. It might be. Let me know if it's good. Anyway, so PB and I and the whole rest of the game, we're talking about how. So, for example, PB's character are all incubi succubi, and people in the game world know that there's some kind of other, but they don't know what kind. And we were talking a lot about how that we just didn't think that most people would guess succubi or incubi, especially not in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Maybe once we start hitting the 80s, they might guess, maybe, but they would probably just assume that they're vampires, right? That I would imagine that a lot of different kinds of others would just be assumed to be one of the main types of others that we know from our media, which could be good or bad, right? Because there are a lot of different kinds of others than our media has historically done. Now we're getting more, of course, but you know. Volpez says, speaking of vampires and disco, as we are at a large underground catacombs network, Roland asks, I still don't know what the Quans are. Are they just magicians? Yes, they're magicians. The Quans and the Musgroves are both magicals as a family. Artie says, oh, it's still some Slugcat, dang it. I actually got to visit the set of Lost Girl by winning a contest about writing why I like the show, and most of it was about how it was about succubi, but not just about sex for the sake of sex. Ooh! Artie, Artie, have a thought. The thoughts for everyone, but you just said something, and it made me think, A, about how once we start getting cable and get saucier, you can have succubi and incubi. But I'm thinking about Rogue from the X-Men and how she's portrayed as a person who wants to have love, but she cannot touch people unless she like suck all the life force from their whatnot. And that feels more succubi than it does feel vampire, right? Depending on how the succubi is framed. Because if sucking the life force from people is automatic and not your choice, that puts the succubi a bit closer to the werewolf in terms of lack of control. So there's a, yeah. Broken. But the Musgroves are specifically only witches, no male magic. The Quans don't have such a prohibition, do they? No, I don't think they do. So with the Musgroves, men can be seers. They can have prophetic dreams. They can have seers. They don't cast magic. But also not everybody in the family gets it. It kind of skips. But also, there's a lot about like twins in their family, as it turns out. That like twins when you get twins, that tends to mean something, right? It's usually going to be twins wherein some kind of mysticalness will manifest. So if you have twin boys, maybe one of them will be a seer and have prophetic dreams. If you have twin girls, maybe one of them will be able to cast magic. Their original founder had both. She had both because she was not a twin. She was a founder of the family. But a lot of people in the family just don't have magic. Some of them do, but some of them don't. The Magicians, the TV show, has sexually transmitted lycanthropy. Going back to the vampires are connected to sex, but werewolves aren't. Actually, Krellin, yes. You asked. Johnson does have twins. He has twin girls, as a matter of fact. He has twin girls. The two twin, yes. That is correct, Krellin. He has twin daughters. That is correct. Krellin, you know me. Absolutely, Johnson has twin daughters. 100%.
The little castle? The reigning lord must have come upon some really tough times to let it sleep in such decrepitude.
Oh, I like him quite a lot. Reach in the catacombs and pull out the shiny object.
The walls and floors give way to the giant's greed, collapse and present you with a pair of ceramic gauntlets.
Ooh. Hey, I leveled up, everybody. I leveled up. I woohoo! Leveled up.
Congratulations. That's the gauntlets down, then. We're doing good on the armor collection front.
It's true, I just need to get those boots when you're not around. I know there's a way to do that. You know. Speaking of, We have just leveled up. I want to... So the thing is... Gauntlets interfacing. Well, that's cool. I currently have gloves that give me +1 interfacing. And these give me more interfacing, so I think we should absolutely wear those. That gave me a weird sound. Did you notice that? It was a weird sound.
As you fold your fingers into a fist, you realize you could knock anyone out with one punch. The white ceramic gloves wrap around your digits comfortably. Your movements cause tiny little clicks, like dice rolling somewhere far away, as the plates reorient to your motions.
I will be responsible with this, just to protect me from harm, not to show off.
The hardened vitreous enamel, at once sleek and light, adds a glow to your cheeks and a spring to your step. Just imagine what a full suit of this stuff could do for you.
Well, I don't know if I need a full suit, though.
You really do feel more confident. Invulnerability does that. Even partial invulnerability.
Yeah, this is long sought after enemy technology. I can't just enjoy it, I must study it.
Remember, this is a highly specialized kinetic redistributor meant to stop bullets. Wear it. Observe its properties. See if there's a weakness in the design. For the day you have to fight someone covered in the same material.
Is that gonna happen? Okay, well that seems slightly distressing. You know, we're gonna just do a quick save right now, because I have to catch up on chat. We've been playing so much. Also, we do have a level up, but I do think we might actually have... We have these gloves here. These are like more special gloves. That's cool. We need to get more parts and pieces. How many more parts and pieces do we need for this suit? Let's see. I still am mostly boring cop, although I'm an art cop. Super communist. Okay. You know, I'm gonna read chat. Johnson twins versus the Thompson twins. Hold me now, hold me in your loving arms. I love the Thompson twins. They're really good. Ditch the tie? Why? I don't think I can ditch the tie yet. I feel guilty. So I have to keep looking for my gun. I have to get the boots off of my victim's feet, but I can't do this while Kim is with me. Okay, so we're gonna like find all the armor pieces. Okay. We have to ask Joyce later. We have to sing karaoke. We need to find a way into the secret passage to the whirling. We need to figure out who made that call. Once you're done with it, send the corpse to processing. Check twice to see whether you're done with all corpse-related tasks. After you send the body away, you can't take it back. We'll have to wait. We've got these tattoos, which I still not quite certain we have to show people about it. Gotta talk to Joyce about the lynching. We need to find out. I think that one weird random person knows about... We got it. The jam mystery. We still have to worry about that. We've got to call back about the armor. We're going to see if we can find the cryptozoologist. We have to find out about the anodic music. Open apartment door for Everett. I did do that. I have to let him know. I do need to get... I need to get a paintbrush. Then we need to go and be like badass with the Hardy Boys. We need to find this working class buddies. I think it might be that guy. The drunk guy. We'll find out. We have to take the stuffed bird to Gart. We have to find Idiot Doom Spiral's jacket. This is good. And we have to hold on to the spirits and wait for the signal. I don't know what that means, but that's fine. We do have things we can do. That's gonna be challenging. The Hanged Man, Perception, that's still really rough. Visual Calculus and... Okay. We still have a lot of really challenging and impossible things to do, to be honest. That are gonna be really hard for us, so that's not easy. But we have a point. And here's the thing. We currently have three thoughts that we can investigate, but I don't know. This one is about our past, and I feel like it might be important. I understand that I don't think it's like a power gamer important thing, but I think it might be important. This one here is about victories, losing. I don't know if that's all about. This one is about, it really hurts to punch this armor. A sword wouldn't even leave a scratch. A bullet would bounce right off. Still, there must be some flaw in it that would allow you to stand your ground against this dangerous enemy technology. You have to figure it out. Figure out what it is. Possibly about beating yourself while wearing it, shooting yourself. Let's see. I don't know what that's going to give us. I'm going to hold off on that. Why don't we increase one of our stats? Why don't we do that? Now the question is, what do we increase? I feel like we have a real problem when it comes to our physical health, and we should probably just do that. Endurance and pain threshold will increase our physical health, and our physical health is low. So I think we should level up one of those. I don't think it's going to be super sexy for us, but I think endurance and what was that? Endurance and pain threshold. Do we have any tasks? Endurance and pain threshold. Not really. So I suppose we just. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Half-life. Yeah, we don't have anything right now, so let's just pick one, because I really don't like being so close to death all the time. So, let's see. Endurance. Cool for fighters who can take a hit, lookouts who don't sleep, human batteries. Oops, sorry. And then pain threshold is cool for unstoppable fighters, guys who won't die, and masochists. At high levels, pain threshold turns in on itself in a seriously unhealthy way, with full and self-destructive behavior. With a low pain threshold, however, you will suffer too easily. Okay. Alright, but at high levels of endurance, it enables you to take a few knocks to the head, enjoy a greater quality of drugs, and shake off a few cardiac arrests. It makes you a powerful man who looks down on the weaklings who can't keep up. However, cops with low endurance are likely to struggle. The body is frail already, and the flesh of a cop will often be tested, and if it doesn't pass, it dies. Let's increase our endurance. We're going to level up our endurance, everybody. I feel like I hope that's better for us. That feels better for us. I'm going to check chat. Super Communist, I watched a film version of that comic, but I should probably read Red Sun. Oh, I should read Red Sun as well. Artist says, I do find it interesting that even though there are a lot of differences between vampire implementations, there are a lot of similarities, especially in them having both advantages and drawbacks, whereas werewolves are much wider, where in some cases it's mostly all advantage and with some minor drawbacks. In others, it's mostly all drawbacks with some minor advantages. So what's interesting about that, Artie, is that I don't recall werewolves ever being all advantages until recently. Like, most of the time, werewolves were not good to be. It's one of the things that always sort of, like, perplexed me about werewolf, from the White Wolf game, is that in lore, being a werewolf is just not good. It's bad, right? Like, even up till... Yeah, most of, like, certainly into the 80s, right? It was not a positive thing. I'm thinking about, like, werewolves from The Werewolf of London. An American Werewolf in London was not fun. Most of those werewolf movies, the transformation was very painful, involuntary, and you'd murder people. So, like, it was a curse. You had to suffer with it. You would have to go and, like, chain yourself to a wall so you didn't murder people. I think one of the few times I can remember it being sort of depicted as a positive was Teen Wolf, in which case it was actually a metaphor for puberty. But I feel like later implementations tend to make them heroes. Yeah. Teen Wolf is the one with, well, I'm thinking about the old Teen Wolf with, Marty McFly, and the sequel with Jason Bateman. You know, the movies? Right, the movies were like basically all advantages. The TV show, it wasn't all advantages. They had a lot of things in it, but it was not all advantages. It was a lot of advantages, but it wasn't all advantages, but it was certainly, because there was a little bit of moping about, right? But it was certainly not like the Teen Wolf movies, which was like all advantages and fun, but certainly not like Howling or American Werewolf in London or the TV show Werewolf from the 80s, or the TV show Werewolf from the 80s. Being a werewolf was basically like being the Hulk, where like you freaked out, you turned into a werewolf, and you start murdering people. I think even in the Vampire Diaries, being a werewolf was not necessarily the greatest thing ever. But it has become basically a mostly positive. Like, when I think about Werewolf the Apocalypse, it seems mostly like it's just like you get to be a super being. Being human, the Vampire Diaries are mostly disadvantages, yeah. Hey, Max, we're talking about the shift of werewolves being just like cool badasses from it being a curse that isn't good to be dealing with, and the shift, right? Because there was a long time where it just wasn't a good thing to be a werewolf. It was Rust Eden letters read Mazout. Okay, just wasn't good. The rear tire of a motor carriage adorns these reeds. And it was usually very painful, and not a good thing. It was like a bad thing. Ooh, let's just take all that money. Woohoo! And I think it's really interesting that it becomes... Oh, we found the church. Figure out what's going on here. Yes. Yeah, I think that's interesting. The shift to werewolves are badasses, yeah. We just watched it happen on Fifth Avenue. Looking back at you from the rust-colored water. You. Okay. Tell me something about that. All right. It's all right. We're going to continue to explore. See what we can find. We're going to head off coastal as best we can. We want to sort of... a kick drum pulse. The music is coming from somewhere on the ice. Ooh. Maybe it's going to be anodyne music. Look, everybody, we're going to find out lots of cool things. I'm very excited. A school of fish huddle around the fence post, then scatter into the dark. Ooh. Before you, a drawbridge. It can only be lowered from the other side. Huh. Interesting. Okay. There are people out there. Maybe we can, damn, it's cold. Maybe we can get over there and figure some things out. Learn something, perhaps. Yes. I think we can, as a matter of fact. We're going to check out the old church. We're going to check out all this stuff. See what we can learn. And I'm very excited. I also don't know if I need a crowbar on me. That may not be necessary, but let's see what we can discover. Yeah, werewolves have become very different than they used to be. It must have taken a lot of patience to do this. We're gonna have a party here? Oh, here we go. Music.
A shaggy-looking girl in her late teens or early 20s kneels on the ice with an electronic contraption in her hand. Hearing you approach, she looks up.
It's also interesting that it's almost always just werewolves and not other types of shifters. Yeah, Artie, it's true. Max says, I guess I'm odd. I still see it as a curse. I've never seen werewolves as badasses, but I'm old. Crow says, werewolves are very European. Other therianthropes come from other cultures. Yes. Yes. I wonder, there must be, well, yeah. And the thing is, I feel like that shift must have happened in the 90s. I mean, you can look to the Teen Wolf movies in the 80s, but it really feels like that shift from like, it's a curse that is bad and it turns you into somebody who kills people and you cannot control the killing, to the 90s where it was the World of Darkness line that where you got to be not a monster, but like the beings that kill the monsters. But it was just a very odd shift because I was like, for me, I was thinking about, I mean, you know, the amazing sequence where in an American Werewolf in London where the fingers are like, and it's like, and you're like, right? Or like the howling where like even in Thriller, right? At the when Mike in the beginning of Thriller, Michael Jackson is like 50s, right? Walking through the park, you know, with the gal, very 1950s, and he's like, I have to tell you something, I'm not like other guys. And she's like, no, that's why I like you. And he's like, oh no, and he turns like the kind of like a werewolf cat thing, and he's like, get away, right? Cause, right, and then like attack. What was I watching? There was another thing with were we watching it together? Was it a video game where there were werewolves? Was it a TV show? Was it a video game? There's some media in my mind right now where there was some kind of mystery around werewolves. Did we watch it together, all of us? Yeah. The bones crunching as they transform. Termination shock, yes. Crunch, that Foley did a lot of work. Yeah, the transformation in the Vampire Diaries are pretty brutal. Yeah, and like, it's not, because in most traditional werewolf lore, once you become a werewolf, you just murder people, and you can't stop it. Like, you do not retain your, sense of mind. There's a better word for that. Like, you're no longer really present, right? You are now just a beast that runs around murdering people. And I think the story, like, you know, that like, and that you must like some of the versions of the curse, you must murder somebody once a month or whatever it was. That it's basically not good. There's a reason why people would go and hunt werewolves, because they were bad, and the reason why you didn't want to become one it was a curse, right? But I suppose that doesn't really work as a PC in an RPG. Yeah, they mentioned that every bone in your body breaks during the transformation, especially the first one. Yeah. In W5, shifting to Krynos automatically triggers frenzy. Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Oh. Hey, people. Max Ryder, Krellin, everybody. How much do you think that our current werewolf lore is rooted in what White Wolf did for werewolf? Because that gives you like 5 different werewolf forms, right? Like a bunch of things that were not necessarily standard to werewolf mythology beforehand, but like you have 5 forms, you still have mostly all of your faculties, you just are stronger and bigger. Like there's a lot of lore that feels very specific to werewolf, that the RPG, WTA, that then gets ported into other media. What do you think? Do you think that this is like, it feels like a lot of new stuff? What do you think? Yes, no, maybe so? Max had a character who was infected by lycanthropy in the AD&D game I ran. They went to quite a bit of effort to get it cured. Ron says, also a lot of the gifts can't be used in Hamid lupus forms. That's the extreme either way. Full human, full wolf. Oh, he was awful good. I know nothing about White Wolf, so I can't comment on that. It was like early 90s, though. Like, I think Werewolf came out in like 92, 93, like around there. So that's pretty early. The middle forms aren't common still. Most lore is just human, wolf, man, wolf. Yeah, absolutely. Like in Big Wolf. I don't think much besides Twilight that I've read has much to do with the White Wolf werewolf lore. Um, well, I'm thinking about the idea that uh, you basically maintain your sapience and that it is a powerful gift, and that basically once you can learn to control it, then actually turning into a werewolf is actually fine. Uh, Being able to trigger it when you want to, whenever you want, versus like I just don't think traditional werewolf lore would work really well for the kind of for the way that people want, like for RPGs. Basically, the basically werewolf lore does not work well with power fantasies, right? If you can only transform on a full moon, and when you transform, you lose control of your person, and they just run around on a frenzy murder spree. I just feel like that does not feel like. See, that would work. Oh, actually, I'm pretty sure they have that in GURPS. That would work if it were a disadvantage, if it were a drawback, like if it were a negative trait that you got points for. But I don't think it would really work as a power fantasy concept where you want to be able to stay in control of your character, run around and like do stuff. So I imagine they just had to change it, and it feels like uh, a difference, right? Like a lot of the other earlier werewolf films, being in the werewolf form is not the main point. It was actually trying to is all the stuff outside of the werewolf form part where you're like, oh no, I might turn into a werewolf. What am I gonna do, right? How do I deal with this, right? How do I get cured? Oh no. Whereas, yeah, the monster as protagonist is very different. Uh, let's see. I like Termination Shock says, I like the variations on werewolves and how people became them were covered in Dresden Files. Werewolves, like 2 words, Lon Chaney. First official werewolf, 92? Yep, 92. Because Lon Chaney was still like a not in control, right? Werewolves seem to be villains or victims in much of what I've seen or read. Yes, before the current day. Yeah, I only started learning about TTRPGs with CR. Oh, well, congratulations. That's not a bad place to start. Where has it appeared? Sapience with Werewolf. Um, Werewolf the Werewolf the RPG, because in Werewolf you're playing werewolves as PCs, and so if when you were in werewolf form you did not have control of your character, that would not work out well as an RPG. If you're spending most of your time being a werewolf, so certainly in Werewolf the RPG from White Wolf, you have sapience still, and you have control of yourself, for the most part. So, right, like there'll be a lot of like turn into werewolf, kill the vampires. So certainly you have it there, and then I feel like a lot of stuff after that, werewolves versus vampires, all the werewolves are still in control of themselves. Yeah, they won't in your Call of Cthulhu game. Yeah, werewolves outside of the Teen Wolf type are not power fantasy at all. No, that's why they wanted to cure the lawful good fired of being a werebore. Mm-hmm. Wolpa says there are a lot of use of a more nuanced look at werewolves in modern urban fantasy novels. Yes, this is what I'm thinking. I feel like basically post werewolf we have a new shift, right, in how we think of werewolves. Cross says, I actually think Teen Wolf was the turning point. Yeah, the 80s. That was the first time being the wolf was good that I know of. Yeah, I agree. I think Michael J. Fox's, yes, I agree with you, Krellin. But the thing is about Michael J. Fox's Teen Wolf and the sequel, Teen Wolf 2, is I agree with you. I think that's where it started. But I think that because those were comedies, I think you needed White Wolf's Werewolf, the Apocalypse, to really take it into the kind of seriousnness that becomes attractive as something that will be useful in urban fantasy protagonists for action films. Like I think that it needs to be moved out of the comedy of Teen Wolf for it to really sort of take hold. I know about the Werewolf the RPG. I mean, I at least haven't seen werewolves much portrayed as good guys outside of Teen Wolf and Scare Tactics. And arguably, most of the werewolf players I knew in 92 thought of themselves as good guys. They're the good guys who are trying to protect the earth and just cleanse the earth of vampires and worm taint. So all the werewolf players I knew thought of themselves very much as good guys and were not particularly tortured. Right? They did not tend to think of themselves as tortured heroes, but just as heroes. Let's see. Go play the game. Yes. Sanctuary. Yeah. Are those RPGs or books? I think comedies are far more formative of people's mythos than dramas. No, Teen Wolf with Michael J. Fox and Jason Bateman are films. They're films, not TV shows. Teen Wolf is a TV show where the protagonists are good guys. They're bad guy werewolves too, but they're the good guy werewolves. Twilight, of course, is a book series and film series. I think there are a bunch of like teen romance novels with werewolves, urban fantasy with werewolves, where they get to sort of be in that space. Yeah. So Krellin, I think that so I'm not going to disagree with you, but I think I'm saying something slightly different. I think that comedies are important for people's mythos, but I think when it comes to catching on, it's the same way that we give Oscars to dramas, not to comedies. It's that kind of a thing, which is, I'm not saying that dramas are better. I'm saying that there's a certain, like, we have to take this seriously, right? That once you can get it sort of framed as a drama, then you can incorporate it into all of those other sort of take this seriously sort of genres. So I think that comedies are very important. I don't think they're unimportant. I think they're very, very important. I think that it's just because they are marginalized, it becomes, for things to get the cultural capital. I don't know if we would have had Werewolf without Teen Wolf. Werewolf the RPG without Teen Wolf the films. But I think that for how emo the 90s were, they were pretty emo, that having a less comedic version of the werewolf protagonist helped bring you to Underworld and all the rest of that stuff, you know?
Oh, hello there.
Yeah, comedies are more often dismissed than dramas. I don't think it's right. What I'm saying is that all those dramas with good guy werewolves are being made people with Teen Wolf as a form of event in their upbringing. Oh yeah, and I totally agree with you. I don't think we would have gotten those dramatic versions of werewolf protagonists without Teen Wolf, the comedies. I agree 100%. I think that it just wouldn't have happened without them. I suppose it's possible. But when I think about all the werewolf movies that were happening in the 80s that were not Teen Wolf, being a werewolf was not a good thing. It was a negative thing. It was not good. So I think they were all much more influenced by Teen Wolf, the films, than they were The Howling or American Werewolf in London. Absolutely. I agree with you. But I think that transformation became important to help it become then a thing that you could have in all of those sorts of other media. Yes. So, yeah, I mean, yes, I don't think you would have had, I can't imagine you would have had Werewolf without Teen Wolf. I'm trying to think if there are any other sort of werewolf protagonists. The thing is, werewolf protagonists. So the thing about Teen Wolf, the films, is that the films Teen Wolf 1 and 2, did not have any villains. They did not have any supernatural villains. Those were basically just coming of age movies about puberty, right? Where the problem is that he's becoming a werewolf, and that's super awkward, and he's getting hair places he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't understand his body, and how can he exist? Like there are no other supernatural creatures to fight. It's really just about going through puberty, right? The other werewolf movie around that time I know is about Ginger Snaps. Oh yes, Ginger Snaps. Was that a little bit? That was a little bit later though, right? Because like the Teen Wolf movies are from the 80s, but I feel like Ginger Snaps was later. Yes, no, you're right though. Ginger Snaps is another one. That's an important one. That's like that's a big one. What year was that? Ginger Snaps film, 2000. Okay, so that's like 20 years later. That's from 2000. Yeah, so that's post werewolf. Yeah. Uh, the wolves in that weren't the good guys, were they? Uh, in Ginger Snaps? Uh, the people I know loved them and thought they were the best. I don't know how they were portrayed, but I mean, like, the people I know identified with them. Max says they were the protagonists, but they weren't nice. Like, did they murder people? I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen it, but Max, get full on Gen X here. Heathers. We're in the moment where people want to feel. There are a lot of people who aren't nice, who are the protagonists that people are empathizing with. You know what I mean? Like,
It's cold out here,
that's
but she's not wearing a hat. She must be freezing.
you know that flip? You know the flip. Where the outsider is actually the one that you empathize with and the hero you don't. Heathers. I think they were abused girls getting revenge. Revenge movies. Mm-hmm. True Snaps is another one that uses lycanthropy as a metaphor for puberty. Yeah. I think that in general media has moved further away from sharp good guys and bad guys. One of the more modern additions is the pack versus lone wolf aspect of werewolves. Yeah. So the thing is, I think it's important to note, and I can speak at least for my space. I cannot speak for everybody, and I think it's probably not true for later generations, or maybe it is. I can't say. I don't know, but I'm from a space wherein the bad guys were usually the ones we were rooting for, because the good guys represented the people who were the popular kids who were bullies, right? So, and I think Heathers is like the perfect embodiment of that. Like, the popular kids were not good in that movie. And actually, you can go back a little bit further, right? You could even go something that's a little bit less charged with those John Hughes films. The rich popular kids in John Hughes films were usually terrible people. And so there was like a bit of a flip, right? Where for a certain group of people who are not particularly well represented, or who were bullied, oftentimes they'd end up like, I sided with Carrie in the movie Carrie, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, for me, Carrie was the one that I empathized with. And the idea of good guy or bad guy, I certainly wouldn't call her a bad guy. I think that she was in a bad situation, and she went a little bit telepathic on people in a bad way. Things got caught on fire. But there are a lot of movies and media wherein the people that you empathize with are the loner outsiders, who might be seen as bad guys in earlier media. My Bodyguard, Heathers, Carrie. Yeah, and I think it just culminates, right? All that culminates in all that Gen X media, like RPG, like Vampire the Masquerade, where you're like, you are the vampire. The entire point of that game is that you play as the vampire, and that you sort of go through that, like, I'm the vampire, I'm the outsider. The Hunger, right? In the Hunger, people are like, go vampires who murder people. When you're very, what people would call very goth, right? There's a space where you are identifying with those people who everyone is attacking the satanic panic, or who everyone's, you're the heavy metal outsider, or because again, remember, put yourself in a moment where people are attacking people who like heavy metal as being dirtbags, or people who like alternative music. But there's a whole kind of a outsider space where the traditional heroes become less interesting to a certain subset of the audience, and those people become, I think, pretty influential when it comes to media making. Let's see. I prefer redemption movies to revenge movies. Right, it depends on what kind of story you want to take, right? I feel sorry for the guy that wrote the Alpha Wolf paper. Oh, me too, Krellin. They've misused him. I'm not really communicating very well tonight. No, you're fine. Instinct for survival. The unpopular kids weren't really good in Heather's either. Well, there are only two. One of whom was JD, who was a bit of a problem, but Veronica, we're supposed to like her. I have difficult empathizing with any characters who do terrible things. You know, that is certainly a position, and I think a lot of people, I think Artie is very similar, right? I know a lot of people are like, if I don't like the characters in this media, I'm not going to watch it, right? Like, I know a lot of people who were really not into like the new sort of golden age of TV because there were so many anti-heroes, and they were not into it. But I will just note there was a whole time in that 80s and 90s when it was just like a lot of anti-heroes, and we had this sort of revival of them. Near Dark. I don't think I've ever empathized with vampires, whereas I totally did. I absolutely 100% identified with vampires and empathize with them. There's a reason why I played vampire and not werewolf. Everyone's stuck there. They're essentially walking corpses. That's one way to look at them. Yes, sure. But they were also people who lived in urban areas that people thought of as monsters, who had to hide who they were, who people misunderstood, who people demonized, and who were being sort of hounded and chased by the government and normative figures. Sort of like normative society would say terrible things about them. And they were, if you go by Vampire the Masquerade, you could have nightclubs, you could be artistic, right? Like, there is a whole nother reading for them that is about being an outsider and persecuted, right? And so I think there's a whole bunch of, there's some really interesting good video essays about marginalized people who identify with the monster of films and not the monster hunters. And I know that was certainly me for a very long time. I mean, I much preferred the aliens in V than I did the humans. And generally speaking, because the heroes in most media in the 80s looked like my bullies, I generally did not tend to identify with them. I tended to identify with the villains in those movies, because those villains were often coded as being of color or queer, certainly being outsiders in various ways. And so the only people who were like me were the villains, and the people who were the heroes were the people who bullied me. So I did not tend to identify with the heroes in most media when I was growing up, because they were they weren't. It's one of the reasons why I personally, and I know there are people who feel differently about this, am very, very distrustful of lawful good people in D&D. Because the lawful good people were the ones who had burned my D&D books and who bullied me. Like, they were the ones who got the center, they got the shiny bright light, and we were cast as the bad ones. And so when you are cast as the bad one, but you see your own humanity, but the society around you does not see you as human, and then you see a movie where there's a person who's not being seen as human versus people who are being seen as human, who look and talk a lot like the people who bully you, who are in the mainstream, it is very easy and understandable that you identify with the monster. Because the monster, they call you a monster, so you're like, okay then. That monster, you don't even see that monster as anything that has any value or worth, but I know that I do. And so there's a way in which, if you're looking for representation, the monster is the only representation you have. And if you can see people call you monstrous because they can't see who you are, you can then go and see the human or the humane within the monster in the media. So there's like a long-standing history of, we call it like there's a theorist, Jose Esteban Munoz, who calls it disidentification, when the only representations you have are villains, that you're able to take that, like take what representation you got and then be able to twist it so you can make something out of it that is affirming in some way. And, Volpes says, traditionally werewolf stories movies were a vehicle to tell hidden monster story. You couldn't tell from the first look who the villain was. If you're on the outside, right, or on the inside the loss of control. For me, it depends on the case. And some of them I don't enjoy, others I don't. I find that some of them can be very shallow, and their whole point is that they are an anti-hero and there's only one character trait. Well, that's not very interesting, right? PB says, I definitely grew up empathizing with the monsters in media. Yeah, mostly because they were the ones that looked like me or felt relatable. Absolutely, same. Artist says, yeah, Legacies is kind of all about how even in a world with vampires, witches, and werewolves, it is humans that can be the real monsters, while they definitely aren't saints either. Mm-hmm. PB says, I knew I wasn't bad, so how could I believe that these characters were bad? You know, absolutely. Absolutely. Termination Shock says, this entire conversation makes me want to go rewatch Werewolf by Night. So, for example, let me give you an example of this, of what PB's talking about. One of the, I mean, certainly there were other media examples, but one of the ones that I think of is The Crucible, the play by Arthur Miller. And in that play, Abigail Adams is the villain, right? She's evil. She's a bad guy. Everybody hates her. She's the terrible one who's this manipulative woman who just goes and like lies and like attacks the good couple, John and Elizabeth Proctor, who didn't do anything wrong. And he is so honorable. The play tells you he's honorable. And she's so honorable. She admits that she was wrong for being a little bit cold, but like, oh, they're just like so good. And Abigail Adams is like this evil, terrible villain. And when I first saw that play when I was 14, my first year in high school. And I will tell you, I watched that play and I was like, no. Abigail Adams, I had so much empathy for her. And I was like, I feel like people are being very unfair to her, and this is messed up. And I to this day, will defend Abigail Adams in a kind of a complicated way. But I just, I feel like John Proctor is a real problem in that play, and nobody sees it, right? And it comes from looking at those that everyone attacks, right? I don't think I care for anyone in The Crucible. Well, traditionally, John Proctor is like the honorable one, right? Who's a victim of a vindictive woman. And Elizabeth Proctor definitely is virtuous, and she's not done anything wrong. And they're the victims of like this terrible Abigail. But it comes down to this. It's the same thing with the Blue Angel. Who do you empathize with? Do you empathize with the insider or the outsider? And if you empathize with the insider, then there's no need to look at Abigail Adams at all. She's just like the worst. But if you identify with the outsider, then you look at Abigail differently. And I remember reading that play over and over again. And here's the thing. One way you can tell the story is Abigail Adams, John Proctor had an affair with Abigail. He realized it was a bad idea. He called it off. He tried to make amends to his wife and get her forgiveness. Abigail Adams, because she's bitter and vindictive and cruel, decides to go and do some kind of evil magic, gets caught for it, and rather than like accepting things, revels in her power and gets who knows how many people murdered, and just enjoys it because she's cruel. Like that's the and then in the worst part of everything, she wins in the end, and tragedy, right? And John is killed. That's the way to understand. That's the way I think a lot of people understand it. Like in that one moment, he never lies, but he lies to protect Elizabeth, and so therefore, then he dies, right? You're playing Rogue Trader right now. What's it like, by the way? What's it about? And yet really highlights how in the Warhammer 40k, there are no good guys. And I'm playing pretty much the closest to a good guy in that world. Right? So, I will tell you a thing after this. So, that's the story, right? And you know, she's an evil seductress. She's an evil, vindictive, cruel woman. You know how women are. They're the worst ever. And like, and she's just murdering people, and she's cruel, and she's like the mean girl. She's the worst. And I have theater training, and when you do theater training, you do scene study, right? And what about The Bad Seed? Oh, that's a great film. But The Bad Seed, she embodies the insider, but it turns out she's secretly evil, right? So that's one where like I did not identify with The Bad Seed, but I was like, I identified with, oh yeah, all those people who look all very fine and dandy, they're actually kind of messed up, right? That's what that one was about. So Abigail Adams, she is not from Salem. In the play, what we know about her is that she's actually she's not from there. She's not a Puritan. She's not from that town. She actually lived out somewhere on the frontier with her family. And then her family was murdered. That she slept with her mom and dad, right? Because, I don't know, in a tent or whatever, a wagon train. They were in the same bed. And that they were murdered, their heads were bashed in while she lay in bed with them, by Native Americans, I think she said in the play. She must have been very young. She must have been like 12 when this happened. And because she had no one else, they sent her to Salem to live there. So here she is, like a 12 or 13-year-old who was not a Puritan, did not grow up in that space, was out somewhere else, so she had a lot more sort of freedom, went through this very traumatic event. She comes to this place, and as she says, people treat her very badly because she's an outsider, and Salem is very cliquish. They treat her very, very badly. She's not accepted by the community. People look at her as some kind of a weirdo. She gets a job at John Proctor's. She is 14 years old, and they start having an affair. He has an affair with a 14-year-old. He is her first love, right? So she's totally in love with this guy who is married, and he tells her a lot of things in this play. He tells her things like, everybody in this town is a hypocrite. They're all a bunch of liars, they're a bunch of hypocrites. None of them are, like, good. He talks a lot of smack about the people in this town. And he also talks a lot of smack about his wife to her. And she's like, yeah, they're all hypocrites. Yeah. And then he decides to break it off with her. He does. He does not actually say to her, I don't want to be with you anymore. What he says is, my wife won't let me be with you anymore. I have to do this, like, I mean, I still really care about you and everything like this, but I've got to make it work for my wife. So he doesn't actually break up with her by saying he's not interested in her. He basically blames his wife for their breakup. So then she goes and she works over at that other household. And she's 14. She's still in love with this guy who didn't really break up with her. And she and her friends go dance in the woods to do a love potion, as young people do. It's sort of silliness. And they get caught. And then the authorities come in. And they walk in and they're like, you were doing witchcraft. The penalty for that is murder. We will hang you and we will kill you because of what you did. Unless you happen to see goody so-and-so dancing with the devil. Did you see so-and-so? Did you like, and she's not dumb. She's like, oh, they're going to kill me unless I say that I saw that person that they don't like. Well, they're all, okay, yeah, sure. I absolutely did. I absolutely saw that person. And so then it becomes this thing where they want her to finger people that they don't like. And she's like, okay, I don't want to be murdered. So she does. And she already is primed not to like them anyway because of what John Proctor said. So she's going through this whole thing, and then it becomes this whole thing, right? It becomes out of control. And she's already like, I don't like or respect these people. They don't treat me well. Okay, fine. Becomes this huge, massive, massive thing. She has a scene, and this scene is often cut out of The Crucible. There's a scene that is in the play, but it's often cut out, where she meets with John Proctor again, and she's like, I know that you still love me, and like, we can get back together. And he's like, no, but yes, but no, right? Like, he waffles quite a lot. They often cut that scene out because it doesn't make him look that great. And it could be played as a sort of a vulnerability for her. And in the end, of course, we see her faking it, but of course she's faking it because she has to, or they'll kill her. And the whole big trial, right? So, and then of course at the end of the play, she escapes. She's like, I got to get out of here because the whole thing is falling apart. So for me, what I saw was an outsider who went through a lot of trauma, who was taken advantage of by somebody who the community thought of as being so great. And of course they're going to believe him and not her. Of course they will. And she was put in a really bad position. She took advantage of it as best she could to save her own life. She got a little bit drunk on the power, but she's never seen with any kind of empathy at all. Nobody has any sympathy for her. Nobody cares what she's been through or what she's about or what kind of terrible life she would have had that brought her to that. Nobody cares about her at all as a human being. They just see her as a villain that they want to see punished. And if you are an outsider, which I certainly was. Am I going to go murder a lot of people? I am not going to go murder a lot of people. But I saw her as like a 14-year-old girl who was treated really badly. And I didn't think that she was a big evil villain, but that's because I look to the outsiders and I give them empathy as opposed to just demonizing them, which is what our media does. Our media gives us villains just hate without ever thinking about who they might be. But if you are the person that society hates, then you tend to relate to those people differently. And for me, I thought that Abigail Adams was given a real raw, sexist, misogynistic take. And it was my dream to play Abigail Adams. I really wanted, because people played her like a mustache-twirling villain all the time. They're just like, aha, I'm Abigail Adams and I'm evil. I was like, I really want to play her because I feel like I understand her humanity. And I think I could play her. I think I could play her as a human as opposed to a cartoon. I did get a chance to play her once. Only one time. It was really hard for me to get that part, but I did get the part, and I played her with as much humanity as I could and understanding and empathy as I could. And I feel proud of what I did. The audience still just wanted her murdered, for the most part, because they could not see her as anything other than a villain. But I still was proud of what I did. And I still felt like there might have been some people out there who understood what it was like to be treated so badly. And then not respond well, not saying that she responded well. I certainly would not have done that myself. But sometimes that's how people respond when they, like some people when they're bullied very badly, they become more empathetic. Some people when they're bullied, they don't. And I think that's where she was at there. But for the grace of God, go I, as you say. And I was still very proud of what I did with that role because I think I did right by the character, even if a lot of people still just wanted her murdered. And that's the thing, right? This is like what PB says. If the only people who look like you or seem like you are villains, and you know that you're not a villain, you can often look to find the humanity in these other characters as well. And it's a process. It's a process of how do you approach characters and who do you empathize with? And people often just don't. It's the orc problem, right? It's the orc problem. People don't want to empathize with orcs. They just want them to be people you can kill. They just want to kill orcs. They don't want to feel bad about it. They don't want to think about it. They don't want those orcs to have children or families or love people. They just want to kill them. They don't want to feel bad about it. But if you're the kind of person who you're more likely to be looked at as an orc than a human, you're probably going to see those orcs differently and think about the mass slaughter of them differently. And that's part of the tensions we're seeing in the RPG world right now, is a bunch of people who are more likely to be associated with orcs than with elves and humans are now more visible in the game world and being like, hey, it's kind of messed up. And it's a tension because there are people who just really want to murder people without having to feel bad about it. And if they're chaotic evil, you can just murder them and you can feel like a good guy. And that's the problem, right? The problem is that there are people who think that murdering chaotic evil creatures makes you a good guy. But if you personally are more likely to be called a chaotic evil creature than a lawful good creature, not because you're chaotic or evil, but because you look different, having people advocate just murdering you without asking you any questions first starts feeling very uncomfortable, right? And so there are these, just different. It's about your standpoint, right? It's just about your standpoint. What it is. Let's see. What about Joseph Kerwin, who was said to have led the Salem witch trials in 1692 for Providence? But what of Charles Dexter Ward? Both of those are men, right? Who have a lot more mobility. Same company that made Wrath of the Righteous and Kingmaker. So, I see. A CRPG set in the world of Warhammer 40k, you pay a rogue trader who are kind of pirate barons out in the outskirts, but one's blessed by the Emperor with a lot of authority and freedom. Huh. Oh. You know what, Artie? I'd heard of Rogue Trader, but I hadn't heard anything about it. I just assumed it was sort of like I didn't realize it was an RPG. I assumed it must have been like someone like a 4X game or something like Rogue Trader, like you build an empire or something like this. But that's cool. I should look into it. I compare Rogue Traders most to East India Trading Company. I take it you're not a fan of shows like Dexter or The Punisher, Daredevils. I have not. I've watched neither Dexter. No, I don't think I've watched any of those. Playing a pro Aldari though, which has been interesting. I just read at Footfalls. You're probably further on. I should. I'm gonna pull up a tab. Pulling up a tab with Rogue Trader. Rogue Trader. So I can look it up. Okay, Rogue Trader. I have to clearly look up this game and see what it's about. Okay. Abigail Williams. Yes, Abigail Williams. Yes, thank you. Not Abigail Adams. Abigail Williams. Yes. That's Hannibal. Dexter's about a cannibal. No, he was about the serial killer who kills serial killers. Not familiar with Punisher or Daredevils aside from what little I know of them as comic book characters. I heard that Punisher, the TV show, was really good. It was
Come
about
on
PTSD.
to my house.
Come on in my house, come on. Come on in my house, come on. Come on in my house, I'm gonna give you candy. Come on in my house, I'm gonna give you everything. Boo ba doo ba doo boo boo ba doo ba doo boo boo ba doo ba doo boo doo ba doo ba doo. Hey, welcome, Raiders. Hello, Raiders. Alcifer, how are you? What are you doing? Alcifer, what did you stream? Give me all the details. How are you doing? What's going on? We're talking about identifying with villains at the moment. And I think identifying with villains is really tricky because it depends on what your subject position is and what you're identifying with, right? Are you identifying with being evil? Or are you identifying with being misunderstood? Right? And those are two different things. Are you like, I want to be evil? Or are you thinking, I know what it's like to be accused of being evil when I'm not? Right? Like those are two different ways of thinking about it. Let's see. Dexter's a serial killer that only kills and attacks criminals and awful people due to his father giving a code. Max says, I have trouble empathizing with liars and manipulators. Max, I have to tell you something about 1950s pulp novels. I'll be right there in a second. Every group wants a token group to hate attack. Yeah. My Dark Heresy group had a conversation a while back where I claimed orcs were the least evil people in 40k. Aren't they, plants? 40k orcs are plants, right? Max says, in an RPG, I prefer to negotiate and somehow stop combat. Artie says, whatever you do, never watch the show. Then. I barely made it through the first episode, and it made me so uncomfortable. Joseph Kerwin was a kind of a joke. He was more Lovecraft story and terrible. It's noted in the case of Charles Dexter Ward, he fled Salem during that time and is inferred he was part of a coven there. Let's see. Where are we at? Okay. I'm good. I was playing some Dead by Daylight, and I saw you're playing Disco Elysium and was so ready to come watch. Come and watch with us. We play, and we're also talking about villains. It did take me 4 years to complete the Outer Worlds, but that's because it's open world. You know. Oh, they're fungus. Dear child, it's freezing. Where's your hat? We're gonna say that.
Huh?
I said you should have a hat on.
So should you.
I have a hat on. I should, and I do.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
I do. It's nice. You should wear one too if you plan on staying outside in this weather.
Yeah, well. Look, man, fuck the hat.
I don't feel like I don't have a lot of authority. You know what I mean? So I'm just not that kind of cop with authority. Kind of bad at authority. Is that kind of language really necessary?
I'm sorry I said fuck the hat. I was concentrating on something else.
It's all right.
My whole family swears and it rubbed off on me.
I don't care. I do it. Yes. 50. Yes. So 1950s. You love villains myself. Yeah. And I think it also depends because I also feel like there was a bit of a shift, right? I can feel like there's a bit of a shift in what the kind of villains are. There was a kind of a villain that, like, Frankenstein's monster that felt misunderstood. Like, oh, I feel like under different circumstances, this person would be a different person, or, you know, there's like a different kind of villain. But then there are villains, like some of the more recent villains don't feel that way to me. So I think it depends on what kind of villain we're talking about, right? I cannot improvise with Cruel DeVille. Sorry, she wants to kill puppies. Uh, you know, Max, I'm not saying this about you. I know people who don't care about characters in media that kill humans. Scores of humans, that's fine, but kill a dog, then you're done. And that always bothers me a little bit because I actually like human beings. And it bothers me a little bit when people are like, oh, kill all the people you want, but don't kill a dog. And I was like, oh. But humans are like, you know, what's that device you have there?
This is a portable recording device.
Oh.
It's for field recording. Low quality, but still.
Oh, and the wires?
Actually, just one wire. I picked on it till the braiding came loose. The wire leads to a contact microphone.
Oh. Got it.
Okay.
What are you doing out here in the cold?
Recording, I guess.
And what is it you're recording exactly?
I think I'm recording cracks in the ice. But there's no way to tell. Not without headphones. I think I just recorded your footsteps too. Not sure how that will sound.
What happened to the headphones?
My boyfriend sold them.
What
I
for?
don't know, man. Things. Just stuff you need for life.
Right.
Everything checks out, sire.
And what are these recordings for? The cracks, the footsteps? EDM?
The musicians in the Elysium used them for making music.
Nice.
They looped the stuff, cutting the tapes together.
Mm-hmm.
They make music out of cracks in the ice and keys jangling.
Nice.
Crazy sounds like that. It's hard to explain.
No, that sounds awesome.
Anyway, I thought I'd make some too. It's supposed to be, like, a music place anyway.
She rubs her shoulders and looks around.
I don't really know what I'm doing. They use synthesizers too. I don't have a synthesizer.
No, you know what? You can make a lot of music with just looping surround sounds. You don't need a synthesizer. Synthesizers are cool, but like the stuff you could, like, seriously, cracking ice and footsteps, you can do good stuff there. Jingling
She
keys.
looks at the recording device, the thing she thought would fill her hours with joy and escape. It's turning out to be an empty fantasy. She feels childish, very useless all of a sudden.
I want to make her feel better by, let's see. Someone kills a dog in a movie or book, I'm done with them. I don't care who they are. I wrote that before you said it. Yeah. Well-made and creative villains are ones that you can see their point of view, even if you strongly disagree with their actions. I think that's one style of well-made villain. I think sometimes you can also, depending on the kind of media, like a two-dimensional stock villain, like a Snidely Whiplash, can also be fine. Like, I feel like you can go either way. It just depends. Like, if you're going for a real pulp sort of, like a 1930s pulp adventure, like Ming the Merciless is like a pretty two-dimensional character, which I think is fine because so is the hero, right? I think it depends on the kind of media. I think you can go either way. I think they both can be fine. Very John Wick. I don't want to kill humans either, but I can deal with a person killed in a movie or book better than a dog for some reason. Yeah, that's kind of a thing right now. Oh, good. Now I don't have to make a John Wick joke. Alcifer says, I gave 101 Dalmatians a rewatch recently. The cartoon. Ah, yeah. And I feel like there's a strong argument that she has bipolar disorder, which makes her a very interesting read. Oh, interesting. I suspect you've been bitten by more humans than dogs. More people have hurt me than dogs by a wide margin. There is a level of innocence to animals in movies that humans don't have. Unstable says, while I have more sympathy for animals in media than I do humans usually, I do ever feel no sympathy for animals which are used as weapons. Weapons aren't pets. Artist says, there's a quest in Miles Morales Spider-Man that is all about using environmental sounds to make music. Oh! Ooh! Artie! That sounds so cool! Now I have to play that. PB says, willingly identifying with the villain is difficult and uncomfortable. When villainy is placed on your identity, you don't have a choice but to examine the villainy of your identity. Yeah, that's right. I also think, see, here's the thing. When it comes to, like, valuing dogs more than humans, what always makes me a little bit uncomfortable about that is that I belong to a race that people don't value as much as dogs. Not all people, but there are people who don't value me because I'm black, but they value dogs. And when people say, and I'm not accusing anybody here of that, but as a person who knows that there are people who value animals more than they value my life, it always makes me uncomfortable when people value animals over people, because I always worry that the kind of people that they don't value are people like me. And it's a kind of a dehumanization. Do you know what I mean? Like to say that human beings are worth less than dogs, that the death of humans is more acceptable than the death of a dog. It's a bit rough. It's a bit rough, I have to say. And the thing is, I know a lot of people who are in that space, not in a racist way. They just like dogs and they don't like people. And that's just hard for me as a person, who, you know, has historically belonged to a group of people that people don't mind dying, but also as a person who likes humanity. It just hurts me, just hurts my feelings a little bit. Sometimes it hurts my feelings and sometimes it hurts my soul. It hurts my soul to think that people think so little about human beings. They, like, when people are like, yeah, if, I've heard people say, yeah, if you and I were in a burning building and I had to either let you burn alive or let my dog burn alive, I'd just let you burn alive. And I'd be like, oh, wow, okay, wow. And I wouldn't. Right? Like, if there's a human being, I would save the human being every single time, before I'd save the cat or the dog. And to know that there are people who would just let me burn alive is a bit like, it's a bit disturbing. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit disturbing, that people would do that. And it's just one of those things I think about. You know, I think about what that means to feel so little love for one's fellow humans. It's just a thing I think about. Just a thing I think about, because I would run into a burning building to save human beings, anytime, every time. Even my bullies, if they were hurt in a burning building, even my bullies, I would pull out of that burning building. And it's just one of those things where it can be rough, you know, but everybody's feelings are their feelings. And I know so many people who just don't like people as much as they like dogs. So I can't fault people for those feelings because so many people do it. It also is a bit rough because I'm not a dog person, I'm a cat person. So I often find the obsession with dogs a little bit weird, but also that's because I'm not a dog person. But I do not wish harm on dogs. I don't wish harm on anything really. But yeah, it's just awkward. It's just awkward, I gotta say. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Max. Also, Miles Morales is Max values me. It's very short, although it is a sequel to Spider-Man, which was longer. Oh, is it really? I do think it's rather fitting that empathy is on the screen for this conversation. Yeah. I don't like those bullshit two-choice hypotheticals. I'd say both. Fuck this question, or die trying. Sorry. Hey, that's fair. The problem is that in that situation, more likely all three would die. Yeah, those kind of questions trigger me, I guess. But like I will, for the record, I do not ask people, hey, if you could only save a person or a dog, which would you choose? People just volunteer telling me that. People will just tell me that. Like, that is not a question I ask people. I don't tend to ask questions with that formation. It's not for like, yeah, no. I think sometimes it might be interesting, but that doesn't tend to be what I do. People just volunteer that. They're like, if I had to choose between save, like, people just straight up do that. They're like, if I had to choose between saving a human being or a dog, I'd save the dog. I was like, oh, thank you for letting me know. I will just need to know not to be injured in your presence, I guess, right? Because you'll just let me die. Okay. Like, I don't ask those questions. People volunteer that information to me, and I was like, okay. The instances in which you need to choose between people's lives are so vanishingly small that we shouldn't waste any time contemplating the hypothetical. Mm-hmm. I love my kitties, but if our house were on fire, I would save my roommate first. Then I would probably die running back in the fire for the cats. Mm. I'll be honest, I'd not go back in for the bullies. I would. The cats are already at the house, Rissa. Don't go back in there. Cats are smart. It's a version of the trolley problem, yeah. Cats know how to get on their own. I would hope so, but if I didn't know where they were and wasn't stopped from retrieving them. He says, yeah, I'm in the same boat, Trooper. I think a lot about the value placed between people and domesticated animals. Yeah. And charismatic megafauna. Hawkeye says, most animals have better survival instincts than humans do in a fire. I'd say the people first. Hawkeye, I'm also into that space, yeah. Max is going to put a meme on this one. Oh, thank you. That goes like this. You solved the trolley problem. You've killed the person responsible for tying all those people to the trolley track. It's finally over. Max, that's really good. That's very
Please,
good. I like
your
that.
call.
It's a very strange thing to just... No, it's really weird. You know, Artie, and it's a weird thing because there's like like usually that people like, I've known a couple of people like this. They'll just get on a space about how much they like. It's weird. Like I usually do not like, this is not a thing I prompt because I usually do not want to hear the answers to those questions. Because I find it a little bit disturbing, but people like to volunteer that. And it's usually tied into things like people who have dogs are better people than people who have cats. There's a lot in there that I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. I don't think I've ever heard a version of it with people tied to the tracks. Oh. All I'm going to say is I have concern over those whose immediate choose dog over human. And it's just like, oh, okay. Thanks. I mean, thanks for letting me know, I guess. It makes me a little sad, but thanks for letting me know that I cannot rely on you in an emergency. Okay. Thank you. Like, it's good to know. It's good to know that if I am injured or hurt, I cannot rely on you. Thank you for at least telling me.
No, man, fuck that. I'm cool. I'm sorry I said that. I'm sorry about the fuck.
No, you could curse. I don't, that's fine.
It's okay.
The lieutenant backs up and throws me a glance. You know what? I'm going to give her my hat. Here you go. Here, you need this more than I do.
Thanks.
Oh, lost my hat. It's all right. She puts it on. It's a bit large for her. So, you said it's supposed to be a music place? What is?
That? The boys think it could be a place, like the Palaceum or something. Stupid. It's really not going to be a Palaceum, that's for sure.
The boys?
Yeah. Andre and the guys, they're inside, in the tent.
And why is that?
Wait, why are you freezing out here while the boys are inside?
They got too much stuff crammed in there. No room.
Stuff like what?
Music stuff, mostly. Like this tape recorder, but bigger. And there's piles of it.
Why not just leave some of it outside so you don't have to freeze?
That stuff is more expensive than I am.
Wow.
More expensive than any of us, really. Doesn't matter. I can take the cold.
I also value human beings more than equipment. Okay. I had some other questions.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, what's your name?
A cell.
Her hair is dyed blonde, with dark roots showing. There's a coarseness to her features, some masculinity below that timidness.
A cell who? I'm not a young suitor. This is official police business.
Okay, it's Burger.
A very common name.
Okay. Tell me more about this music place you've been planning in the church.
It's supposed to become like a club for anodic dance music.
Oh!
Like that new style of synthesizer stuff they play at the Palaceum.
I need to learn about that. I need to learn about anodic dance music. Ah! Quest.
Except that, yeah.
Oliver's like, yeah. The name of the meme, all of the meme images are of that, though. Let's see. At 9 p.m., let's get ready. Go to the Engleharts. I'll keep 9:30. Now it's been completely different. I have queso for CR tonight. I'm excited. Ooh, queso. I have one last round of this Korean beef, ground beef bowl, and then I have to make some schnitzel tomorrow. What's your name? One of the things the players my tabletop games never both with, it seems, or introduce themselves. Kind of drives me crazy. Yeah. Oh, good queso. Bother with. Oh. Anodic music? Now I'm going to find out what it is. What is it?
You know, anodic, cathodic, music that's made with electronic instruments.
Electronic instruments, like what?
Synthesizers and tape consoles. Microcomputers, too. Anything that uses electricity, but isn't guitars. Also found sounds, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. The gardener was wrong. I'm not just some disco holdover. Going to experience feature, but also, side note, disco is the some of the roots of electronic dance music come from disco, specifically Eurodisco, specifically Giorgio Moroder. So like you can be a disco head and also still like your EDM because they're linked.
Yeah, of course.
That's all. I'm just saying that there's a link. So you want to turn the church into a club.
I know. It's not my idea. Andre and the boys found the place. It was supposed to be deserted, but now they can't even take it.
She nods towards a sloping mass of wood on the coast, then shivers.
Hey, don't get me wrong, but you're cops, right?
Yeah, why do you ask?
Okay, well, maybe you could talk to Andre and the guys, because there are some strange things going on in that church. If you're police, you should look into it, right?
I'll talk to them. Sure.
They're inside that thing there. Would
Yeah?
be cool if you did. Was there something else?
I had another question.
Go ahead.
I would like to be very empathetic right now, but right now my empathy is not particularly high, so I will leave it for now. I feel like I might be able to increase my empathy.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Oh, hey, did you hear it? Oh, they're just in that tent. That's not a lot of, So here's what I'm thinking. What I'm thinking is I might be able to increase my empathy and then go back and talk to her. Painted with pastel, someone's trying to bring cheer into the world. Oh, listen to that. What do we have? Trash from some unending party. A pole screwed into the ice keeps the tent erect. More tribalistic markings. This post is covered in little humanoids. Well,
A pane of Eternite has been planted into the snow. 2 poles are holding it up. Barely holding it up. It could fall over any minute. A stronger gust of wind might be enough.
what is
It
this?
looks like a makeshift bridge. Could be convenient.
Okay, well, let's push the Eternite over.
The pane falls into the icy snow with a soft thunk.
Yes, we're gonna save. Since we have been so good. So, Max... Oh, wait. This is someone's home away from home, just like mine. Okay, everybody. We're gonna talk to these gents in here. Also, I'm really proud of myself. I found out more about anodic music.
The tent is just tarpaulin fabric covering a pile
Max
of
has
stuff.
something for you.
The flap is open. Inside, 3 young men are listening to some new form of music. It's like nothing you've ever heard. One of them looks at you.
Krellin says, I'm constantly introducing myself in my Dark Heresy game. Since our cover story is being the retinue of a nosy noble, I'm the nosy noble. Nice. Burn, baby, burn. Disco Inferno. So do you get everyone's names? I do that if you get, yeah. For instance, I take notes. I got the names of 2 people that vanished immediately in the night and left me with their decrepit mansion. Nice. And Sybil says, in our Amber game, my character largely tries to avoid having to introduce herself. Sometimes people know you personally, it can be a bad thing. Yes, so 1950s pulp novels. What I think is really interesting is there was a time when villains were very like stock villains, you know, like these are bad guys. They're sort of like cartoon caricatures, which can be fine. And I was reading a post, and it was about how if you make a villain, they have to be sympathetic. Like that's how to make villains. They have to be like, you have to understand them, be sympathetic. And I was like, otherwise, or they have to be really smart. They have to be like really smart, really brilliant, like Hannibal, or very empathetic, which I think can also make a good villain. But it was advice for writers. And like, if you're a writer, you have to make your villains sort of understandable, sympathetic, empathetic, all that stuff, right? Or very smart, very compelling. And I was like, oh, all right, interesting. And I was reading a book, sort of got into like 1950s pulp novels. And what's interesting to me is that a lot of the protagonists in these 1950s pulp novels, now most of the time they're not like super evil, Although I read one that was, the protagonist was a terrible human being. Not in any way empathetic, not smart, not brilliant, not super talented, just a terrible, terrible human being. And no redemption, no redeeming qualities. Just pretty awful. And I was reading this book, I read the whole thing, and I was thinking to myself, this was like one of the more extreme versions of what was pretty standard for a lot of those pulp novels. And most of them, they were not like super evil. They were just like con men and, you know, not nearly as smart as they thought they were. But they were not as smart as they thought they were. They were not as talented as they thought they were. They were not really empathetic or sympathetic. And they didn't win. They failed in the end. And I saw it coming. And I thought it was really fascinating that this particular kind of mundane, small, not nice person was often, or was like, you know, was a figure, the kind of person that writing advice now says never write people like this because nobody ever wants to read that. Very clearly, people wanted to read that quite a lot in the 1950s. And so I was thinking a lot about, like, what is it about this particular figure that was interesting and attractive to audiences in the 50s to read? Because we don't write people like this nowadays. And like, even like our anti-heroes today, they're often racked with guilt. Like, they feel bad for the bad things they do, or they've got this internal struggle. Man, in this one, he did not have internal struggle at all. And there was a moment where I usually just make my villains to have some motivation for what they do. Crown says they should be inscrutable. There should be a reason for their actions, but they don't need to be sympathetic. Unless you're doing Eldritch Horror, then inscrutable's okay. Yes. But what's interesting, right, is that this one is called The Peddler, I think it was called. And it was about a guy who was a low-level thug, criminal type, San Francisco in the 50s. And he really wanted to become a pimp because he figured that would be easier money than, like, robbing radios or whatever it was. And so he has an ex-girlfriend that he meets, and she's working as a prostitute in a brothel, and he gets her to introduce him to, like, the brothel owner, and all the brothels are owned by this mobster, and he gets a job in the brothel. He starts working as a guard. He's able to, like, make the brothel more efficient, so he gets better, so he becomes a manager. And he's dating this woman still, but he's kind of terrible to her. He's not very nice to her. He's actually kind of bad. And he's, like, running this brothel, but you might think that he's really good, I suppose, at his job. But then he starts having an affair with the mob boss's wife, which is clearly a bad idea. I would not recommend that one because the mob boss is going to find out and kill, whatever. But he does that. Bad idea, whatever. He's doing it. Not a good idea. And then there are these cops that come in for payoffs, like payola. And they're like, you can't mess with those cops because payola. And then I think he messes with the cops. And that basically, that was a really bad choice too. And so the mob boss is like, you need to leave San Francisco. You need to go off and travel. And your job is to go and, like, convince women to come to San Francisco, and then we'll make them prostitutes. He's like, okay. So he's traveling around, and he talks about how good he is at, like, basically manipulating young women to go to San Francisco to become prostitutes and have this terrible life. And he doesn't feel bad about it. And there's this one moment, like, near the second, like, maybe like this 2/3 of the way into the book, where he meets this woman who's like a good woman, who's kind and beautiful and awesome and smart and forgiving and lovely, and he starts dating her. And I'm thinking, okay, so this is where he's going to realize the error of his ways, and he's going to come to terms, he's going to have a redemption. This is where the redemption happens, right? This is it. This is going to be the moment. And she doesn't know about his past. And at some point in time, he tells her what he does, and she's like, oh my God, that's awful. Why would you do such a terrible thing? You really need to, like, wow, that's terrible, but you could become a better person. You could, like, make amends. And he's like, screw you. You're uptight. And then he leaves, and he does not feel bad at all. And he goes back to San Francisco, and he decides that he wants to basically take over He's got this big plan to take over and become the big head of the mob boss. And he goes in there, I think he shoots the mob boss leader, and he becomes the head of the mob by shooting this guy. And he's like, ha ha, I win, I have everything. And he goes home, he sees his girlfriend. He's not been home for a year. Goes back to the girlfriend's place, and she kills him because he's a terrible person. And that's the end of the book. And I thought to myself, this is just not how we would write books nowadays. Because he's not particularly charming or handsome or smart or talented or anything, right? He's petty and he's small and he's not as smart as he thinks he is. And he makes poor choices that he makes because he's not actually as good as he thinks he is. He's arrogant. And I thought to myself, yeah, we just don't write books like this. But this sort of book was quite popular in the 1950s, where your protagonist is just not. And here's the thing about this book. I do not think we were supposed to empathize or sympathize with this protagonist. I don't think we were supposed to like him or empathize with him or root for him in any way. I don't think we wanted him to win. I think we wanted him to fall, and then he did. And it's interesting because I know a lot of people who are like, well, if I can't empathize with him, I'm not going to watch it. But clearly, there was a whole thing in these pulp novels where the protagonists were people that you did not empathize with, that you did not want to win, that you didn't like. That wasn't why you were reading the book. And I just thought that was fascinating because that is not where we're at the moment. It was very fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. So Frederick Pohl's main character in Gateway is just awful. He did it on purpose. Not a fan of that book or this series, which I read for some reason all the way through. Carl says the final season of Breaking Bad exists because the creator was screaming at his fans, no, stop sympathizing with Walter. Yeah. Alfred says some ideas can just stay ideas. Yeah. Max, I've still not seen that. It's not as good as all that. I'm not sure it's your sort of show, Max. Probably not, says Max. I like Redemption, but I don't think it's coming. So absolutely not. No, not character development. So that sounds like how not to ever have written any book. Ever. Except that these kinds of stories, Max, were very popular. People really liked them. Our taste may have changed, but that doesn't mean that that kind of book is bad. It just means it's not to our current taste. But there was a time when it was to people's taste, and I think that is really interesting. I want the stories to end that way, and then he died, the end. Yeah. This is kind of how the Scott Pilgrim comic plays out and why I like it so much. Yeah. Oh, thank you, 50. Thank you, 15. So he has just a white male, then which was how he got by. Yeah, basically. Comic Scott is so different from movie Scott. I really need to read the comic, Alcifer. I really need to read it. I've heard that I need to read it, that I would like it. So I really need to read it. Unstable says it does seem like the audience is supposed to get the feeling that justice would be served regardless of the circumstances, and does. Yeah. I wonder what kind of story it would take to get that kind of protagonist back into fashion. The problem is, so here's the thing that I think is the problem, Voltail, is that when you look at our modern anti-heroes, the audience does empathize with them and does root for them and does like them. I mean, not all audiences, but the audiences that watch them, like they love Hannibal, they love Dexter, they love these anti-heroes who do these terrible things. They root for them, right? But you're not supposed to root for these characters in these pulp novels. You're just not. That is not what you're doing. And I have read quite a bit of these pulp novels because I'm a bit fascinated by this genre, because it is quite unlike anything I've read before. And it goes against the ways that we're told to tell stories. And so I've thought a lot about, like, well, what is the appeal of these books then? Like, what is the appeal? And that's a great question. And I've thought about this a lot. There is one that I've read, by the way, that I didn't like as much. And I think it has something to do with the fact that the protagonist, who's also not a good person, is framed as being very charismatic and good looking and handsome from the outside. And I did not like that as much. There's something about it that doesn't, I haven't finished that book yet. That doesn't feel right. With the other ones, the characters think of themselves that way, but they are not, right? They think of themselves as being the best. They think of themselves as smarter than everyone else. And more, they just think of themselves as really much smarter than they are, and smarter than everyone else, and better looking than everybody else, and just so much better than everybody else, and able to always pull one over on someone. And that is just not true. That's what they think, but it is not true. And as a reader, I know it, right? Yeah. Scott is irredeemable, and the author does a very good job of it. Oh, I need to, you know, Alcifer, I'm going to read it. That's next on my list. They sadly love the Joker. Yeah. Are there any titles that come to mind that I would recommend? Ooh. He's have nightmares about the Joker chasing me. Oh, interesting. But he still ends up with Ramona because they both suck and deserve each other. Fair. I think the only Joker I like was either from the animated series or the original 1960s Batman series, both of which are watered down.
Come on, get in and close the flap behind you. The warm stuff's getting out.
Okay, I'll squeeze in.
You barely have room for one.
Okay.
You go ahead. I'm too old for this.
I'm actually not, he thinks. I just dislike delinquents.
All right.
I'm sure you will feel right at home. I'll keep watch.
Okay. Oh, hey. Whoa. Sweet. So here's what I'm thinking. And I'm going to go here for a second. So there was this thing about justice being served, right? Unstable Deus talked about justice being served. But what's interesting about these books, look, they're pulp books from the 50s, and pulp books from the 50s, which are related to noir, do not have a lot of faith in the justice system. They don't tend to like the justice system very much, or politicians. It's kind of dark, right? Kim is in a Lethal Weapon movie, Artie Snack. But I feel like, so like, it's not like you can't rely on justice to do their jobs. Do you know what I mean? That kind of a way. I mean, I don't have much faith in either of myself. Yeah, so I think what you get, right, is that you get, and by the way, Voltail, I do have some recommendations for you. I also find these books very fascinating because the 1950s are way darker than TV and film would have you believe, right? So you've got all these films in the 50s, like bright musicals in Technicolor and like Leave It to Beaver. But then the books in the 50s are like, yeah, and then they were on heroin and died. And you're like, whoa. So it's a very interesting contrast to like people got back from the Korean War and they're like traumatized and it's bad, right? Like, and there's something really interesting about a kind of like a, this contrast to like the bright 50s that's happening in all these pulp novels. Very fascinating. Death Hogfather says, then take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder and sieve it through the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy, and yet you try to act as if there's some ideal order in the world. This is my current theory, and you can tell me what you think. You have to check it out. I think there is not the expectation that just because someone is a protagonist, that you will empathize with them or identify with them. That you can read about people that you don't like. You can read about people that you don't approve of. Also, none of these books, none of them think their protagonists are cool. They don't think their protagonist, they don't glorify their protagonist. They don't like their protagonists. And I think it's about, don't forget the unreliable antagonist. Oh, yeah. And the point of Death's rant here was to believe in justice because you need to believe in something. I think it's about the train wreck, right? I think it's about the train wreck. I think it's about seeing people who think that they can victimize other people and get away with it. Or that they're necessarily good guys or heroes. Absolutely, because these people are not. Not the train. The train. I think it's about... I think there's some kind of... there's a bit of a mystery. And the mystery is, how are they going to be screwed over? Because you know they will be. Like, you know it's not going to work out well for them. You know it. The question is, how is it not going to work out well for them? That becomes the question. One of the first ones I read, which is still one of my favorites, is... it was originally called Mona, but I think it was renamed The Grifter's Game. And I've got 6 minutes. You know what I'm going to do, by the way? What I'm going to do? I'm going to save this game. Save it. And I am going to head to our main menu. Confirm. Over here. I don't have like... All right, because we only have like 6 minutes. And this book is amazing. The Peddler's like rough. That's a rough one. That one's grit. That's thank you, Krellin. That one's like grunchy, but the Grifter's game is amazing. It's amazing. I was surprised quite a few times. I had not read books like this, but I've seen a lot of noir, like a lot of like noir films, right? But it starts off. I have so many things I would love to get your opinion on both games and TV shows. But you're already so busy. Well, you know, I've watched Leverage. You know, I love it, and I also like The Librarians. We've got some media in common. I don't tend to enjoy media where the protagonist is awful, but nobody seems to know it, including the people making it. That I don't tend to like very much. Like when the protagonist is just like really awful, but the media doesn't think they're awful. I don't tend to enjoy that. But these books know very well that these protagonists are kind of awful. I also love the art, the Librarians. It was very good. So here's what I was going to say. It starts off with a guy. He's a con man, right? I'll just give you the setup. He's a con man, and he is the best. He's one of the best con men. He will tell you so. He tells you quite often in this book that he's so great, such a good con man. Like nobody could ever catch him. He's so good. Do you know what I mean? Like he can, and also he can see through anybody. Like anybody tries to put one over on him, he can always see through them because he knows people. He can read them like a book. He is so good at what he does. And one of his main scams, he's so smart. He will tell you this. He is so smart. One of his main scams is he likes to go to really expensive hotels, check in, and then rack up this huge, massive tab and then sneak out without paying the bill. And here's how you do it. He lets you in the very beginning, like the first chapter of the book, let you know how you do this because most people are not as smart as he is. Do you know what I mean? So the thing is, you can't do this scam that he does without a lot of expensive luggage. If you have a lot of expensive luggage and you check into this big fancy hotel, they're not going to think you're going to skip out if you have your luggage still there, right? So what he does is he goes to a train station, steals, like, because they have all the racks of luggage, he'll steal some really expensive luggage, go to a hotel, check in with expensive luggage, and then just rack up, put everything on the tab, meals, all this, and he's just so good. He's never caught. He always escapes. He's so good, and he knows everything. He's so good at what he does. And in the very beginning of the book, he steals some luggage, expensive luggage. He goes to this hotel. He's checking in. It's great. It's kind of like a resorty sort of a place. And he decides to open up the luggage. And it just so happens there are a whole bunch of bricks of heroin in that luggage. Like a lot of bricks of heroin. Like not like, oh, this is my personal heroin stash, but like multiple large bricks of heroin in that luggage. And he's like, oop, awkward. Oh, weird. And no. Well, most of these books are often narrated by the protagonist. And they often are quite delusional. They have a very high opinion of themselves. Oh no, he just stole some luggage. But he stole luggage with a bunch of heroin in it. And he's like, oh, I should maybe get out. But as he's pondering what to do, he decides to go to like the beach attached to the hotel and like kind of like hang out there and ponder it. And while he's on the beach hanging out at the hotel, I think he puts on like the swimming trunks that were in the luggage. Anyway, this super hot woman is walking down the beach and she's like, oh, you are so incredibly handsome and attractive and alluring. Why don't I just go and sit down next to you and like chat with you? And he's like, it's true. So hot, sexy and alluring. Of course, this super high class, really attractive, very rich looking woman would be attracted to me and want to talk to me, obviously. And he's like, oh, I bet I could like scam her out of money because she's so clearly rich and she's so clearly into me. And she's like, oh, I've never met anybody so interesting like you. Tell me about yourself. And he's like, I'm rich and excited. And she's like, oh, I believe you. And so they like start having an affair. Yeah, Max, they start having an affair, and I was like, oh, this is a bad idea. Bad idea, everybody. Yep, this is a bad idea. Super bad idea. Whatever. He doesn't see it. I see it, but that's fine. And he learns more about her. He falls in love with her. She falls in love with him, is what he says. And he finds out something about her. Artie's like, she is so clearly rolled the drugs. He didn't think so. And he's also really good at reading people. No one could ever fool him on anything. Do you know what I mean? So it turns out she is married. And she's married to this guy that's a drug runner and like a mob boss kind of a guy. And, well, she has no idea that the protagonist has the drugs. How would she know that? She doesn't know anything about him. And she's just innocent and trusting. Anyhow, she's married to the guy with the drugs. And the thing is, she's afraid of him. Do you know what I mean? Because he's so violent and dangerous. And she just doesn't know what to do. And like, she would just leave him for our protagonist. She really would, because she loves him so desperately. But she's afraid of her husband, and she just doesn't know what to do. If only there was something that she could do, because he's so violent and dangerous, and she just doesn't think that if she left him, he would just chase her down and bring her back and maybe beat her. And if only there was something that she could do. It was the trunks. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gosh, she just doesn't know what to do. And the protagonist is like, oh, I have an idea. I could kill your husband. And she's like, what? No, that never occurred to me. Oh, you couldn't kill my husband. That would be terrible. He does have a very expensive life insurance policy out on him, though. And then if you did kill him, we could get the life insurance and run away together and be together forever, because I love you so much. But no, I just couldn't. That would just be too much. Oh, I couldn't. And he's like, no, it's a great idea. I had this idea all on my own. I'm going to kill your husband, and you'll get the insurance, and then we'll run away together and be together forever. And then she's like, what a great idea. So you'll just kill my husband, then we'll run away together. And he's like, wait a minute, though. I'm a big scammer. I know scammy things. So when your husband's killed, there's going to be like suspicion on you because you're the wife. So we have to make sure you have an airtight alibi so that no one could ever suspect you of having been involved in the murder. She's like, that's a great idea. You're so smart. You're so smart. And I'm just a lady and I don't know anything. Oh, an airtight alibi for me sounds such a great idea. And he's like, oh, and also we probably shouldn't be seen together for like a couple months after the murder because that would be suspicious. So what I think you should do is I'll kill your husband. You have an airtight alibi. You collect the insurance. And then we don't talk to each other for like 6 months. And then after 6 months, when all the suspicion has died down, we'll come together and then we'll be together forever, full of romance. And she's like, I guess you're the big, strong, smart guy. What a great idea. I'll just do what you say. Let's do that then. Anyway, then the rest of the book happens. And I thought I knew where it was going, which I did, but then the book was not over. Then I was like, oh, wait, what? And there's like a couple more chapters. It ends the way you think it's going to end, but then there were like 3 or 4 more chapters left in the book. And it did not end the way you thought it would end at all. And I was like, okay. By the way, spoiler. Oh yeah, she was totally using him. She knew he had the drugs in the first place. Of course she knew, because she recognized her husband's luggage and his swim trunks. She knew who he was, and she targeted him. She didn't just happen to sit down next to him randomly at the beach and like just happen to fall in love with him. She never loved him. Come on. But anyway, our protagonist did not realize that because he's not nearly as smart as he thought he was. And there were some surprises for me that I was like, wow, this got real dark real fast. Okay. Do you want the twist? Okay, I'll give you the twist. Absolutely, she was using him. 100%. He does kill her husband. And it is like a Greek tragedy, right? It's actually worse than that. So, right, he kills the husband. They don't talk to each other. No one would ever suspect her of doing the murder, of course, because she's got an airtight alibi. And then after 6 months, she does not contact him at all. I know that surprised you. I know that was pretty shocking to you. She actually just has all the money and having a great time. She's like living it up in Vegas. She's got some hot boy toy lovers. She's having a great time. And he's like, wait, she's using me? What? What? That surprised him. And what happens though is this is where I figured we'd end the story. Story's over. Da, 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 da. But that's actually not where it ended in this 1950s thing. What happens is he must have her. You know what I mean? He can't let this go. So he kidnaps her. And then he kidnaps her. He holds her like basically hostage in a motel room for a while, and he gets her addicted to heroin. So that she now needs him for the heroin. And so now they'll be together forever because she's addicted to heroin and he's got the heroin. Oh no, he knows where to get heroin. It's also the same heroin, but he knows where to get it. But here's how it happens. So here's the ending. So here's the end. She's now addicted to heroin. So now they're together. You think he wins, right? But then he talks about at the end, whoa, talks about, he's like, I see her and she's on heroin and she's like in this blissful place where nothing can harm her and everything seems peaceful and wonderful. And she just is in this place and I'm not there. And I know we can never be totally and fully together as long as I'm also not addicted to heroin. And I know that it'll only be a matter of time before I start taking heroin so I can be there with her. And I was like, oh no. And so of course, we sort of end there, but we know what's going to happen is that he's also going to get addicted to heroin because that's the only way he can be close to her. And it's going to be like, they're just going to be like strung out to heroin and it's going to be bad for all of them in the end. And I was like, wow, okay, that's how this novel from 1950 something or other ended, with them both burnt out, strung out on heroin with nothing. Okay. And that is not where I saw that novel going, but that is, right. And of course you can't scam anymore when you're high on heroin, right? So it's just this thing where they basically are. I didn't think it was common enough to pull that off. Well, in the end, he wasn't really. At least they didn't find a camera that shows the future, and then they all fell out the window. And what I think is really interesting is that he is not correct about any of his competencies. And neither one of them are good people, really. And like, as I'm reading, I was like, wow, you are not smart. You are being played so hard right now. And it was all true. He was. And then he got played, and I was like, told you. And then he got her back, but then she got him back by getting him addicted to heroin too. And then they basically had a miserable life. And I was like, wow, thank you, Artie. And I think that the attraction, they got their comeuppance, basically, right? I think the attraction to these novels, thinking about them, is that it's about being a reader of people, because most of these are told in the first person, right? You're hearing the inner thoughts of this person. And I think it's about seeing somebody deceive themselves, and you can see it and they can't. And they think of themselves as being everything, and they're not. They're actually just kind of, I think it's about, everyone's like, the brilliant criminal who's the mastermind. I think it's about how actually they're not masterminds. They're petty and small, and they're not brilliant. They're actually not. And I think it's about you being able to see it, but them not seeing it. I think that's what it's about. I think it's about listening to them talk about how great they are and how they've got everything under control, and they don't, and you know it and they don't know it. And you know that they are going to fall. You know that they're not like that you know that crime does not pay, basically. But they don't know it, and you watch them in that slow motion train crash is what I think it's about. And you're not supposed to empathize with them, and you're not supposed to want them to win. What you do is you watch them. You watch people reap what they sow, I think is what it's about. Yeah. Oh, I love the Twilight Zone. Narcissists often project their love of themselves onto people. Yes, I think it's a very psychological genre because it is very first person. I think it's all about sort of like being inside the mind of somebody who is a narcissist and who is not a great person and is not going to win. I think that's really what it's about in some ways. Kind of like watching people make bad choices in a horror movie. Yeah. But in a horror movie, those people are usually not bad people. But in these books, they are. So I think there's something about getting a window into kind of like a seedy underbelly of society and those people not. The bad guys don't win, is I think what he really is what that's about. And they don't win because the police come and catch them, but because actually they're not smart. They're not competent. They're not as good as they think they are. And they're not going to win. I think that's probably what it's about. You know what I mean? Anyway, I will put in a recommendation for y'all in our Discord. So let me give the outro. So thank you for being here. I know we had a lot of really interesting talk today. I thought we were going to get a lot of Disco Elysium done today, but we didn't. Alcifer, by the way, Alcifer, let me get streamer, Alcifer, the C or an S? I'll have to see which one it is. Whoop. Alcifer. You know what, though? I think it might be Alcifer with an S. Let me check. Because, you know, I feel like, because Alcifer was super fun hanging out with us. Yes, it's Alcifer with an S. Let me put this in here. Alcifer. That's not that command. Hold on. Streamer. Alcifer. Boom. Thank you for that raid, Alcifer. Thanks for hanging out with us. It was look, I can recommend a couple of these novels. They're really fascinating. They're a really fascinating look at the 50s that we just don't normally get. And they're also really fast reads because these are pulp novels. They're like 120 pages. You just, right? You can read it in an afternoon. But I'll send off some recommendations. But I think they're really interesting. If you're a writer and you're interested in like different approaches to writing, this is a different one. I don't know if it would be. I will say this. What is interesting about US media now is that we don't tend to have unsympathetic people as often. I'm thinking about how The Office, like the British Office, the boss, David Brent, is just not sympathetic at all. And in the American version of The Office, we had to make Michael Scott more sympathetic, that we just don't do as well with more, like, we want people to be a little bit more sympathetic. And in these 50s novels, they just were not. So that's really fascinating to me. So anyway, I can, at least it's interesting to read at least one of them if you're interested in that kind of, like, thinking about different ways in which people were writing. And I think I will say I would much rather read one of those 50s pulp novels than read a more modern thing where people are kind of awful, but the media doesn't realize that they're awful. The media thinks they're great. That I don't like at all. Like, I would rather watch or read something where everybody knows this person's bad. We all know it, versus they're actually really bad, but we don't know it. That, right? Yeah. But pulp novel was cheap to produce, so they could experiment. Yeah. Television is not a good comparison because people start pushing for making money. Yeah. Although we do have cable, there's so much to talk about. So good. All right. Let me do my outro. Thank you for being here. Really fascinating. I've loved this conversation. It was so interesting. We'll have to, so tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern here on this channel will be part 2 of The Sandman, that 1980s flop of an RPG. We're going to go and finish it. They're off in Casablanca trying to find out what's what. So it'll be Laugh, Love, Lindy, Rocket, Fox, and Wandering DM to finish up that, which I'm really excited about. So come and hang out for that. And then Saturday at noon will be Rain World. Sunday, no stream. And then Monday, no stream. So yeah, you're gonna see me. That's what I am this week. I have not yet announced what I'm doing for the break because I'm dealing with grading. And uh, so yeah, so that's what I got going on. At 10 o'clock, so in 15 minutes, I'll be watching Critical Role and chatting in our Discord. So you can hang out in the Discord with us and chat with us. I'm gonna go heat up some food in the microwave. You can find me at Trooper SJP on YouTube here and on Blue Sky. You can find me at Academic Foxhole at Twitter. There's a merch store we have, and also on Patreon. The Patreon goes to pay for the casts, and that's all the stuff I think. Yeah, that's what we're gonna do, and we're going to. Oh, first off, Max, do not apologize for sharing thoughts. Right, have a wonderful. Oh, thank you for the good luck grading. I've got grading to do. Thank you, PB, and PB. I just said that I've got to figure out what my streaming schedule is for the break because I like to do like one shots and new things and like just do stuff for the break. So be prepared, PB. Be prepared. That's all. Just be prepared. That's it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. You all are awesome, and I will catch you on like 15 minutes or on the flip side. And take care of yourselves, everybody. Bye.